Adam and Dan, if I was to shrink you down to half the size that you are now, and so removing your ability to drive a vehicle, what would become your mount? How would you get from A to B if you were half the size that you are now?
God damn it, Terry.
I'm
assuming this is because we're talking about goblins and small creatures.
Oh, yeah, probably.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So
let's roll.
Okay, yeah, okay.
I got a 5.
I got an 18.
Right. Go ahead. What bonkers nonsense are you gonna...
So, Adam, as you are well aware, I work with a person who listens to the podcast and who I affectionately refer to as chairman of the Lollipop Guild.
Yeah, he's not tall.
He is not a tall human. He's quite short, vertically challenged. I know he listens, so I'm really hamming that. John, you're short. Anyways.
If you didn't have a beard, we'd think you were in grade 2.
Yeah, right? The hairline also. And that's coming from me, so you know it means something.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyways, so I often joke about, because I work side by side with John quite a lot, that we should get the reverse standing baby Bjorn, which is basically a backpack that you wear that has a metal bar that your young child could stand on and like hold on to your shoulders as you run around. So my answer to this question is Terry with a saddle. And I know Terry will like this because I will whip him to go faster. Mush, bitch. Mush.
All right, so in a D&D world, if I can choose a mount, it's going to be a gorilla. Because hands with opposable thumbs, you give them weapons, they can wear armor.
I said the same thing. Terry.
But, okay, in the real world, if I'm going to mount someone, it's going to be Terry's mom.
Thank you.
It's a Mimic, the Roundtable Dungeons & Dragons discussion podcast, where you never know what you're going to get.
Welcome to another episode in our conversation on mob mentalities.
Not mom mentalities?
I said... No. Where we look at some of the sneaky
edible arrangements.
Ew. Where we look at some of the sneaky humanoids out there that can make up the enemy armies in Dungeons & Dragons. I'm Dan, and with me, regrettably, today is Adam.
Hello.
And this episode is called Goblinoid Hosts, the Stealthy Elite.
Did you get it?
No.
It's a play on the wealthy elite.
Oh, okay.
It's a rhyme, Dan.
Yeah, no,
it's when two words sound similar at the end of the word.
Oh, is that what that? It's a reference.
No, it's a literary...
We've reached out to our army of friends and allies to help us break down what a Goblinoid host looks like in 5th edition, specifically goblins and bugbears. Next episode, we'll cover even more goblins before we move on to hobgoblins in part 3. First, though, I'm going to go over some of the lore that Volo's Guide to Monsters has to offer before we jump into a bunch of stats from the Monster Manual and one crazy little bugger from Volo's. You'll know him when he comes by. All right, Adam, you comfortable?
Never when I'm in the same room alone with you, Dan.
Well, strap in, because we're about to go over what 5e has to offer about Goblinoids.
Say in or on.
In?
First one, then the other, my friend.
Gross. So, Goblinoids in 5e are a full family of creatures like humanoids or orcs. The 3 main breakdowns we see are, of course, goblins, bugbears, or hobgoblins. Although all are brutish, savage, and unpredictable, the subspecies of goblinoid are as varied as they come. Consider this. There is as much difference between elves and humans and dwarves as there is between goblins, bugbears, and hobgoblins. Cultures, attitudes, outlooks, everything separates the goblinoids. Now, all 3 have gotten the same treatment we saw for orcs over the past couple weeks. Their backgrounds and lore are now fully fleshed out, and we have a lot more to look at than basic stat blocks. Now, to break down the different types of goblinoids, it's best to start with the one that most people expect when they hear the word goblinoid.
Kobolds.
The other short annoying things that make traps.
Gnomes.
The other short annoying thing that makes traps. I'm talking goblins.
Gotcha.
In short, goblins are described are described as small, lazy, black-hearted, undisciplined, and selfish monsters that prefer dark and dismal homes, usually in the form of caves, ruins, or deep dark forests. I imagine a lot of these places are dank, dark, moist, and slick, with algae-covered walls with half gnawed-on bones strewn about the floor. The layers of the goblins are also built with hampering medium creatures in mind. There are many noise traps. All of the corridors and tunnels are small and cramped, with potentially thousands of hidden arrow slits and other traps for goblins to pick off errant intruders.
Now, okay, you're specifically talking about when goblins are by themselves, away from hobgoblins and bugbears.
I'm specifically talking about goblins at this point.
Okay, because, I mean, here's the thing, and like, I think it's episode 3, we're really going to dive into it, but these 3 are their own different societies, but they do come together.
They do come together.
Like a mega society to make the Goblinoid Host, right?
Yeah. I briefly mentioned that a little bit later on, but they...
We'll really dig into that when we get into hobgoblins and shit, because that's where it really
comes to fruition. They're basically, goblins themselves are incredibly varied and a lot more crafty and cunning than I think we give them credit for. So with that in mind, we see that goblins typically shun the light. So what they'll do is any location that they choose for their lairs will be shut off from the light. Don't be surprised by the ingenuity of a goblin lair, as goblins are ingenious crafters and miners, and when their tribe grows too big by either natural or other ways, they will expand and dig deep in one location. Basically, these guys like to put down roots and stay in one spot. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, to protect their home, they will also set up the surrounding environment to do whatever purpose they may have. Dozens of traps, hunting parties with war horns, packs of wolf spies. Make sure that a goblin tribe is never surprised by intruders. Goblins will scout and lay ambushes on roads or trails that lead through their lands. They will also bury their dead far away, meaning if you come across a goblin burial ground, you are likely on the edges of their territory.
Now, it's interesting to me because they're not particularly, like, base level, they're not, I don't want to say crafty, but they really aren't. Like, they don't have like a plus, 3 to intelligence or wisdom. The idea that they've actually got a little bit of a hindrance compared to the average person when it comes to things like passive perception and whatnot, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's not great.
But that doesn't stop them from doing it. And the thing about goblins is where they lack the individual intelligence, they tend to just throw bodies at things until the problem is solved.
They're smart enough to know where they're lacking by comparing against other civilizations.
Yes.
And then adapting to use the best of their capabilities.
Yeah, exactly. And you'll see that the more into a goblin territory you get. I mean, if you get past the edges of their territory, you'll find crude mills and smelting yards and even the homes of the lesser castes of goblins on the exterior of their lair. Now, we're going to talk about the caste of goblins later. Not this episode, but they have a social structure to them.
They're actually surprisingly better thought out and designed compared to the majority of the other mobs.
Yeah.
Short of, like, I want to say drow, which are probably the best thought out of all of the mobs.
Yeah, even with orcs, we saw that they were well thought out, but the structure of their society wasn't. We had to, like...
Very simplistic.
Where do Orogs play in with the hand of... or the eye of Groomshin?
Yeah.
There's a lot of balancing that. It felt lacking, but with goblins, we actually have a social structure built for us.
Yeah, we're going to see that with hobgoblins as well, right? That they've got a really solid build. Like, the game designers put the fucking effort in with these guys.
Yes, they did. And if you'll see more of this caste system, more of the society as you move into their lair, which, as I mentioned before, has all those tunnels, but also has large dens. Now, one of the things I wanted to mention is a goblin's love for rats and wolves specifically. The analogy that was written down in Volos is, as a human likes dogs and horses, so a goblin likes rats and wolves. And they often form the same...
Wolves or wargs?
Wolves. Specifically wolves, but wargs do come into the picture when you're talking about goblins as well.
Okay.
Right? They're both there. But the other big thing about them is their shrines to Maglubiet, which I will butcher.
Maglubiet.
Maglubiet. Yeah, it's there's that hidden L that gets me every time.
Yeah.
But we're going to keep talking about goblins. I mean, we know that We'll be looking at the stat block for them, but they're small-sized, orange-skinned, little nothing.
Orange?
Orange and yellow. They've got earthy tones to them. They're not the green skin that we know. They're not green-skinned goblins typically. That's something we see in Pathfinder. In D&D, they're more orange and earthy tones.
Okay, orange like clay is orange though, like brown.
Yeah.
We're not talking like bright flower orange.
No.
I would say that these guys, if you're gonna have them green, they're sickly green. They're like an olive maybe, with a lot of like
Pale, like a
yellow,
pale, like tint of green.
They're like baby vomit green, right? Like it's not. You're right. We're definitely more in the yellow spectrum on this, but no, it's not the Pathfinder level of green, or even the Lord of the Rings green that you expect to see.
Yeah. The other thing about goblins is they are historically and well regarded. They're kind of cowardly. They're smart. They're cunning. They'll attack when they know, but they are known to be a bit cowardly.
I've got some thoughts on that later. Actually.
Yeah. But they're surprisingly resilient. The goblins themselves have always ended up being the low man on the totem pole in the Goblinoid Host totem pole, right? They're always the one that gets beat around. So like beating a goblin into doing what you want, it just won't work. Goblins aren't going to succumb to getting beat up, right?
No, they get beat up all the time. Like,
they're used to it.
A daily life thing for
them.
Right?
They're often bullied into submission by hobgoblins and bugbears, but make for poor servants and slaves because their genetic lazy stubbornness that goblins employ. But the one way you do manipulate goblins, if you want to get them focused on a task, you need to tempt them with shinies or chaos. They live for obtaining all things glittery and making those they see as superior, which is basically everybody, suffer for their superiority, whether through pranks, which are often more malicious than harmless, or outright hostility.
Do they really think that everyone is superior to them, or do they just think, like, hey, you guys have privilege. You guys have advantages that we don't have because you're taller, you're bigger, you're faster. It's not our fault.
I think it's a mixture of that plus a long memory of who has bullied them. Like, they are vindictive. And
right? But I don't think that they everyone else is so much better than we are. We better do what they say, or they're going to give us shinies. That is not the 5e goblin.
It is those people messed with us 20 years ago. We're going to mess with them now.
I'm trying to think. There was the house elf. I'm not going to get the name of it, but the crotchety old fucker. Not Dobby, the one that was like mean.
We are the wrong crew for this.
I really need Megan or Terry here for this, but
wasn't his name Goblin?
No, it was not. It was like, I want to say it was like Crotchet or something like that. But anyway, I'm not going to get it. Mieka would know, but I'll say this: the way that he scowls and looks out of the corner of his eye, but then does what he's told anyway, is such a goblin thing for me.
Yeah, I was gonna mention him as a possible attitude source for inspiration. Like, he's spot on what a 5e goblin should be.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, as for the goblin tribes themselves, they are ruled by the strongest and smartest of them. There's a distinction in the size of goblin tribes too. A goblin boss has a lair, but a goblin king, they can rule hundreds of goblins and even more of the goblin's favorite pets, which I mentioned before are rats and wolves, spread over many layers. But don't go thinking that a goblin king's power is absolute. A bugbear or a hobgoblin can easily take it for their own purposes. Where a goblin may give up fealty to a hobgoblin, they will never, ever, ever, however, give up fealty to their god, Maglubiet, the mighty one and lord of the depths and darkness.
I looked it up. Sorry, creature.
Creature, right. Yeah. A goblin will tell you that if their god wants to be seen, he's an 11-foot tall, battle-scarred goblin with black skin and flames pouring from his eyes. Goblins adore their god. Full stop. They love Maglubiet. They don't fear him in any way like an orc would fear Grumsh. But they do believe that one day, when their spirits join their god's armies on the cubes of Acheron to battle the orcs in the Eternal War...
See last episode.
See last episode.
I did a big rant about that. Yeah.
this is not a good thing because a lot of goblins get nervous as they are typically lazy and don't want to live under the irreplaceable tyranny of Maglubiet.
All right, I got a question.
Sure.
First of all, goblins are CR 1/4.
Yeah.
Right? And orcs are CR half. So 1 orc equals 2 goblins on the battlefield.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking about this eternal war. You know how with the fiends and the celestials, in order to kill them, they've got to be on their home plane?
Mm-hmm.
If you kill a goblin in the material plane, he's just going to go off to Acheron, right? Same with an orc. But if you go to Acheron and kill them, will that... Like, are they facing oblivion in that war? Is that true death from there?
I know what I think from their soul. Well, it's eternal. It's the eternal war. I would say the souls.
But then, no, that just means
start back at the back of the line and then make their way back forward to the front lines. Die, go back to the back and make their way forward. Die, and that is just their life.
No, there's references in the orc stuff about when the war is over and all of the host armies are killed off, right? So, like, there is an end to this. It's not an ongoing conveyor belt, right? It's something that I want to ask an orc or a goblin how they feel about that. Like, what do they think happens when they die during the eternal war? Do they get reincarnated back in the material plane? Do they get blinked out of existence? Do they become...
I think ultimately, from a goblin point of view, that end game is purely up to Maglubiet.
Yeah. I would agree with that. Well, I mean, from an orc point of view, it's totally up to Grumsh as well.
Right. But let's take the opportunity now to talk a little bit of Maglubiet. Again, we'll be talking about him in the Pantheon in depth later, but you can't really know about goblins without knowing about Maglubiet.
Yeah, because that guy's a dick.
He is a massive dick. He defies all expectations and is straight up a god of conquest. Like, this guy is not to be trifled with.
Yeah, he's not the happy-go-lucky little goblin god that you think.
Not at all. He's the only known creature that can inspire hobgoblins to march, waken the lazy bugbear, and embolden the cowardly goblin. He is known as the goblin god, and is truly one of a kind, sorta. There's a heavy asterisk to this. Now, in the act of ascending to godhood, Maglubiet slayed or subdued every other single goblin deity, of which there were many.
Goblin or goblinoid?
Goblinoid.
Because I know there's a handful left.
There's a handful left. I mean, you see...
He subjugated them all and killed the ones he didn't want.
Exactly. There's a couple still alive, so I'll just mention their names here real quick. There's Kurgobayag.
Obviously, yes.
Yep. Hrugek, Grankle, Skigaret, and Nomagea.
I feel like I'm going to have to go through all these again much later, and I'll do a deep dive on the gods.
Yeah.
So that we can get the pronunciations. The other one, you missed one. He who shall not be named. There's an unnamed god in and among the goblin pantheon that the goblins think if they give this god a name, Maglubiet will come and kill that god because he will have the power over that god. So as long as he remains unnamed,
cool.
He still exists.
Skigaret kind of fills that void a little bit with bugbears as well. But yeah, that's badass. Anyways, a lot of these gods still do exist, but they are the first of the followers to Maglubiet and serve him without hesitation. Again, we'll dive into them a little bit later. Back to goblins, now that we understand who their god is. Goblins will bully whatever they think they can, much like Maglubiet does. They are cunning enough to know that they aren't physically impressive, and that at any moment Maglubiet can call on them to his war, so they live short lives to their fullest. Their favorite tactic is trapping. Miles around every lair is traps and nets and other snares to hold on to the prey for their multitude of hunting parties. However, if a threat is too much for them, they will not hesitate to flee, leaving whatever is trapped and pissed off in that trap. This is compounded when goblins make their homes by humanoid settlements. They will steal what they can from a humanoid settlement, and if these deeds go unpunished, they will upgrade what they steal, up to kidnapping the people of the town and enslaving them. These people are often useful tools, but also status symbols for a goblin boss. And now we're going to talk about one of the biggest things about goblins and how you run goblins. Goblins give a shit about status symbols. They are, by all definitions, your hoarding horde. They love their shinies and trinkets, often using these things as symbols of authority and place within a tribe. After all, if you could steal what other goblins could not, that means you're objectively better, right?
I would also say that they do a lot of enslaving too, and that's got to be a huge sign for of like status for them as well. Just because, look what we managed to subjugate. Look at how powerful that thing is, and we beat it.
Well, you
for
look
the
at
low man on the totem pole. That's a big deal.
Oh, 100%. I mean, goblins can make much anything their status symbol: tattoos, pelts, crowns, special earrings, clothes or nose rings, pets, which can include bugs or frogs, or slaves, like you mentioned, or even corpses, which they will hang from the walls into some twisted status symbol for a goblin. Do you got any questions about goblins before we move on?
I really want to dig into their gods. I really want to dig into their society and the structure and whatnot. But I know we have 2 more episodes coming on them, so like we'll dig into that. The other thing to really point out with, I mean, I guess all goblinoids in general, is the fact that these guys are team players in a big way.
Yes.
They're just not on your team, right? They are very much, they're not like the den mother, the cave mother orcs, right? And they're not like
there's not a lot of inter-tribe politics. They follow their structure.
Yeah, but I mean, even kobolds are like for the greater good and for the best for kobold kind. Goblins don't give a fuck. They're just like, me and my group serve this purpose. By being a part of this group, I stay alive longer.
Yeah,
it's a selfish banding together for survival more than anything else. But they really do work well together.
I look at it this way: when a human, an elf, and a dwarf meet randomly as humanoids, they meet.
It sounds like the beginning of a joke. A human, an elf, and a dwarf walk into a bar.
Yeah, there will be a lot of pretense, a lot of posturing, a lot of distrust between those races, right?
Yeah.
If a goblin runs into a bugbear, runs into a hobgoblin, they know their pecking order. They know who they answer to. And goblinoids themselves are so devoted to their god. They're very spiritual creatures. They're so devoted to their god that if they come across a den of bugbears or a legion of hobgoblins, they know that this is probably a sign that Maglubiet is wanting to form a host.
Yeah,
and they will just step
like the big omen that they're always waiting for the indication that it's time to go to war.
Yeah. So we're kind of done talking about
goblins. We'll put a pin in goblins.
We'll put a pin in goblins. Now we're going to talk about our other focus this episode, and that is bugbears. Bugbears, if not in active battle, doze, sleep, and lounge about. They're not known as great and cunning crafters or farmers or creators. They don't give a shit about any of those things, especially when they can easily bully the smaller races, i.e. goblins, into doing those tasks for them. Bugbears are so lazy, in fact, that even in a larger goblinoid horde, if they were ordered to do something, they would often have to be woken up or bribed to even engage.
And I feel like even then they would just bully the goblins into doing it.
Yep. And even then, they are just as likely to run from fights or work if they feel like it would take too much, i.e. any effort. However, they are truly savage, and when engaged, they are strong, ferocious, and will use their strength and obscene reach to their advantage. However, again, they aren't marathon runners, and if a fight is taking too long, they'll just give up and run away. Now, a lot of people do say bugbears, when you say the word bugbear to a new player, they go, okay, so it's half bug, half bear.
No, it's not like owlbear like that.
No. It is a large, furry goblinoid creature.
Almost ape-like.
Almost ape-like,
Their
yeah.
huge, upper limbs, the arms that almost
they
draggers.
drag on the ground, right? Yeah. So, they really defy that. They're called bugbears mostly because in stories of humanoid, tales they tell their kids at bedtime, like scary stories or stuff like that, they'll point at bugbears because some of the things bugbears do are those things that you could point to as triggering horror film level stuff. They will rip heads off people. They've got this reach, and they are masters at being stealthy.
You know, I'd never heard the phrase or the term bugbear before D&D. The idea that bugbear... Goblins and hobgoblins are like European mischievous little, almost fey-like motherfuckers. Bugbears are boogeymen.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and as a matter of fact, the word boogeyman derives from bugbear.
Yeah.
Right? And so these things are creatures of the night that are horrific nightmare fuel.
You know all those like grim stories where like the children go wandering
Like your sex
like,
stories? That level of grim?
Different kind of grim. 2 M's. They get like lost in the wood.
Tell me more about your wood. Yeah.
They get lost in the woods.
Yeah.
And some unknown creature from the dark reaches its arm out and strangles the life from, one of the children without ever revealing anything more than its arm.
You had a horrifying childhood, Daniel.
Pretty much life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, so these guys they really derive from that, but are so lazy.
I've got some thoughts about that.
That they don't really play into it in actuality.
But I think that they... So, I think that this is one of these things that's strongly implied in the lore and that no one ever says. I think that when Gary Gygax was designing it, he built it to be a certain way and painted the picture for his players, and then it never made it all the way through. And here's what I have to pitch for you. They're not lazy, they're nocturnal. And most battles happen during the day, which is why they don't want to do it. They have to be engaged. They're going to be bullies because if you're dealing with them in the daytime, they're cranky, sleep-deprived bastards. But you hit them at night, they're sneaky shock troopers, really frightening, coming out of the darkness.
But only I'm not 100% sold on that one. I agree that they're nocturnal, but that's only because it does say that both goblins and bugbears just don't like coming out in the light.
Yeah, but
they don't like the daylight at all.
Yeah, but it's funny because it's not like they have sunlight sensitivity like kobolds or some of the others do, right? Like the Underdark creatures do. So I think that they can operate during the day because hobgoblins, I think, are diurnal, which is the opposite of nocturnal.
Yeah.
Right? And so... So when they pull the host together, the others are just shitty to be around. But I think that you're going to see bugbears be active at night.
I have one more rebuttal.
Yeah.
And that is what bugbears themselves say.
Sure. And I'm going to ask you how much you trust them. But what do you got?
So bugbears, I mentioned earlier that all of goblinoids are very spiritual creatures. Bugbears fit that mold as well. They attribute all of their strength, their keen agility, their ability to stealth, and their ridiculous the-dudedness. Yeah. Just this lazy, laid-back atmosphere that they have to their twin gods, the brother Hrugek and Grankle.
Yep.
Okay. Now, Hrugek is where all this brawn has been gifted, but Grankle is the smarter, stealthier brain to that brawn. And it is often said that bugbears will defend their laziness by saying that Grankle has sapped their vigor so that he could keep a watchful eye on things.
Sure. And let me tell you something. If you try to wake me up in the middle of the night, I'm going to tell you, no, you got to go get someone. It's not my fault. I'm just really tired. It was a long day. I had they were really noisy upstairs, and I am pushing that onto someone else so I can go the fuck back to sleep.
But they go one step further with it, up to the point where they will grab heads and
hot.
Disembodied.
Less hot.
Yeah. One of the favorite trophies, you know how goblins have their status symbols? One of the favorite trophies of a bugbear is a head with no eyelids that they will put on a pike and hang out because it shows the savagery that Hrugek gives them. And without the eyelids, it shows that ever watchful gaze of Granthuk.
Sure.
Oh, sorry. Grankle. Yeah.
Sure. But I still think that these guys are primarily nocturnal. You're not going to see them walking around. And even if this is because of the gods, and they've got a couple of stats or traits and stuff that, are attributed to the gods as well. Mm-hmm. Even then, I think that they're going to ham that up a little bit because they don't want to fucking do anything during the day.
Yeah.
right? I really do believe that the laziness is such a weird detail to add to these guys that no other mobs really get. No other creature really gets the emphasis on laziness. When you would think that some things like lizard folk or maybe cold-blooded mobs like UNT and whatnot would just sit and wait and be patient. No. They're very active. They're off in their own tribes doing their own things. Bugbears are legit lazy.
I view them as laying in wait, right? I wouldn't say they're nocturnal because I see them being lazy at night as well, but they are immensely practical. They're immensely aware of what's going on. I wouldn't call them, handicapped in any sort of way that way.
No, I'm not saying that. I don't think the big dumb brutes.
Yeah.
I just think that they're lazy. I think that why would I do this if someone else can?
That's exactly what it is, I think. I think it's just they like passing the buck because why?
Yeah, maximum outcome, minimum effort. Yeah, that's exactly the name of the game.
Now, when you have a group of let's just talk real quick about a grouping of bugbears. When they're isolated from the Goblinoid host, bugbears function in small, tight, gang-like family units. They don't reproduce prolifically like the goblins do, and they will never build their own homes because of the aforementioned laziness. So they tend to live in caves, ruins, or abandoned homes. These living arrangements last as long as it benefits a bugbear's lethargy. But if the living in a location or with some specific bugbears causes any sort of issues or conflict, bugbears will just as easily walk away from their family as sabotage them to force them to move out. Because after all, why would I want to move my stuff when they can move theirs?
Yeah.
Right?
Path to least resistance. I get a lot of respect for these guys.
If you want to make them move, though, one should just mentioned, as I mentioned before, Skigaret. This is the bugbear version of the boogeyman. This is the boogeyman of the boogeyman. Boogeyman of the boogeymen.
Boogie boogie.
Boogie boogie. Skigaret is a goblinoid demi-deity, much like the brothers, who the bugbears believe gives them their willingness and often instinct to run from conflict. Skigaret is said to possess the bugbear who thinks it's about to die and will force that bugbear to get the fuck out of Dodge as fast as possible, often at the cost of other bugbears and or goblinoid lives. Bugbears don't talk about this when this happens, as they are afraid mentioning his name would call him forth.
Cool. I got a question. In the D&D hierarchy of shit, what the fudge is a demi-deity? Is that your word or is
that's my word?
Okay.
Yeah.
Because they're gods. They're on the pantheon.
They're gods. They're on the pantheon, but specifically with goblinoids, I call them a demi-deity because they are all definitely one step lower in power, effect, and service to Megalobiet.
See, okay, you're just doing it differently than I am then, because the same way that Asmodeus is a archdevil the way that all the others are, he's just the best of, so I raise him a level up. I do that with Maglubiet. He's just a level above the other gods and almost power and viciousness, if not cunning. Okay. Same way that Groomsh is the head, the way that Zeus is the leader of the gods. It doesn't make the other gods less of a god. It just means that Zeus has the biggest, swingingest god piece that he's going to use, right?
I don't know, because Maglubiet has defeated or subjugated all of the other gods in the Goblin Pantheon, including like the god of butchery and savagery and battle. Like Maglubiet has
but that's what I mean. He's a step above the others. That doesn't mean that everyone else is lesser.
I guess
they're not warlock patron. They're not demon lord level. They're still gods. They are still walking around stomping their shit through Acheron.
We'll be going through all of that later.
I just want to talk about it now, Dan.
So, Adam, you got anything else about goblins or bugbears?
Yeah, I've got a lot of ideas, but also we've got 3 episodes.
Yeah,
I've got some time on this. We'll come to it naturally.
Okay, well,
and if not, I'll force it in where I want.
So,
name my sex tape, ladies.
Anyway, that's it for right now. Over the next couple of weeks, we're going to go deeper over the
name of your sex tape
on the goblin gods, pets, casters, and of course hobgoblins. But for now, we should reach out from the guild house to our field agents, finding out what they can about these savage mob boys. If you want to learn more insights as well, check out our episode 22 of the podcast titled Goblinoids, Foes or Fools.
Yeah, we sat down with Terry and we really went through kind of the broad strokes of it all. In one quick sitting. But yeah,
So first we'll hit commercial and then we will come back. Hello, lovely listeners.
Or as I like to call you all, my NPCs.
Damn it, we're recording a commercial.
Right.
For those of you who aren't aware, we're currently in the middle of a massive project called The Many Roads to Amelia, where we're continuing our Call of Cthulhu series. Adam has been working tirelessly with a number of people to bring different kind of actual play to you guys.
Or NPCs.
Stop that.
Oh.
As I was saying, from October 2020 to October 2021...
That's 13 months.
On the 13th of each month, we'll be releasing a single episode of our homebrew saga that lays the groundwork for our next miniseries. Adam has taken over as the keeper of arcane secrets, allowing me to join all the other players on this bizarre and horrifying ride that Adam's twisted mind has come up with.
But here's the fun part. Each of these episodes is a one-shot with only a single player. I've massaged the rules to make it a little deadlier and secretly worked with each player to craft each separate story to be radically different in plot, theme, pace, and tone. That means that the players have no idea what the others are up to or what parts of the clues or overarching story the others may know.
We're not even allowed to listen to the episodes as they get released, so we'll be going into the next miniseries completely blind.
This is exciting because it gives us the unique opportunity for attentive listeners like yourselves to actually know more about what's going on than the players do. That means that you can sit by and listen to all the voices from the Deep Dark of Radiance return, mostly with new characters, and you might be able to put the pieces together in ways that the players won't.
Also, there's the threat that if our character dies or goes insane in our one-shot, we won't be invited back for the next series. That's keeping us paranoid, curious,
and sometimes reckless,
and desperate.
So, tune in every month to listen to me and either Dan, Terry, Dave, Megan, or Mieka,
or Brad, or the 5 new voices,
as we whittle down the list of survivors and take a look at what mysteries and horrors are slowly unfolding in Northern Canada, Southern America, and subterranean Egypt. There are many roads to Amelia, and you are invited to walk them all with me over the next year. Just check the It's a Mimic feed on your favorite podcast provider for a new episode on the night of the 13th each month.
Until then, let's jump back into the episode. So, can you give me a hint because I'm recording this commercial with you?
Yes, I could, but I won't.
I hate you.
I know. Okay, so you're absolutely right. When most people think of goblinoids, they focus on the small humanoid namesakes themselves, which are, of course, goblins. And that's as good a place to start as any for a conversation because they're not too difficult to fight. They've got relatively simple motivations for new players to understand. And they're easy to insert into any location. That's one of the unique things about goblins, as opposed to most of the other mobs. Goblins, orcs, and kobolds can be freaking anywhere.
Yep.
You don't really get that out of the majority of the others. So Brad is going to start us off by showing us what a basic goblin and their mounts look like.
Hello, Brad here, checking in from the Yawning Portal in Waterdeep yet again. Today, we're going to discuss goblins and their trusty mounts, Worgs. Goblins are small humanoid creatures, goblinoids, generally tend to align with neutral evil. Definitely some sort of evil, but most people would consider them chaotic. But when you actually look at them in the rulebook, they're considered neutral. And if you think about it, it makes sense. They actually aren't out to break laws. They just don't really have laws. They don't consider them. So they're not actively unlawful. They're just neutral. Goblins have challenge rating of 1/4, and they have a AC of 15. So they're decently difficult to hit. I guess they tend to have leather armor and a shield, making them fairly durable, and their small size makes sense with high dexterity that they're able to move. Speaking of stats, they have a strength that's not that great. I mean, they're small creatures. They're not going to be especially strong. They're dexterous, though. They move quickly. They are nimble. I mean, when you're that size, you got to be able to dodge the things that are bigger than you. Constitution, they've actually got a decent constitution, probably from living in all the filth that they reside in. Intelligence, not bad. They're an average intelligence, about the same as a human. They're pretty clever creatures. They like to kind of make traps and things like that, so you need to have a decent intelligence for that sort of thing. Wisdom is not a great stat for them. They're not especially wise. They don't spend a lot of time out in the world. They live amongst their own, so they aren't really aware of what's going on in the world around them too much. Charisma is also low. It's not dumped, but it's low. They're not especially charismatic. They aren't really interested in negotiating or making friends. They're basically they live to stay alive. That's basically their goal. They like to enslave things, and they like to control them, and basically they try and stay alive for as long as possible. Goblins are actually quite stealthy. They have a very good stealth bonus, dark vision, and not a great passive perception due to low wisdom. The languages they speak are common in Goblin, and they have the ability, Nimble Escape, which allows them to take the disengage or the hide action as a bonus action on each of their turns. Goblins tend to wield a scimitar or a short bow. With a scimitar, they get a decent attack bonus, being the fact that they're using their dexterity modifier, which also allows them to do some decent damage with it. And same with the short bow being a dexterity weapon. They really do lean into the strengths that they have with dexterity. Goblinoids are not friendly creatures by any means. They tend to live amongst themselves, they tend to be fairly insular, and when they do find something that they are not associated with, they either will capture it and keep it as prey, food, or as a slave, or if it's bigger than them, they tend to just run away and hide until they can get enough numbers to overcome them and slaughter them. Goblins are malicious. They're out there basically to win battles by any means necessary. They don't fight fair, they don't fight by any sort of rules, because there aren't any rules for them. It's not that they're breaking the rules of combat, the rules don't even exist in their little brains. Once they've had a victory, they celebrate, and they celebrate hard. They cheer over the dead. They're just mean, spiteful little creatures. You would not want to end up on their wrong side. Goblins have a very loose leadership hierarchy. There usually is a boss, and then above the boss in a region there might be a goblin king or queen, but those reigns don't tend to last long because they're often overthrown by a coup, and basically the order just exists in order to basically have some sort of structure. And it's not uncommon for goblins themselves to be ruled over by something bigger, such as a bugbear. Goblins like to ride creatures. Their favorite mount is the Worg. Worgs, interestingly, actually have a higher CR than the goblins themselves at 1/2. They have a lower armor class of only 13. They got a decent hit pool, but they can move 50 feet per turn. Goblins really enjoy mounted combat. Using these wargs, they're actually able to get around the battlefield quickly and use the wargs to make up for their shortcomings. Especially when it comes to strength. Wargs have a really decent strength. They have a decent dexterity, good con, but low intelligence, which allows them to be domineered by the goblins. Wisdom is actually neutral. They're about as wise as a human, which for a beast makes sense. And they're not especially charismatic. If you look at these things, they're not nice to look at. They don't ask questions. They aren't curious. They're just there to eat and destroy. The only attack that they have is a bite attack, which is going to hit hard with that bonus to their strength. And it does piercing damage. If you get attacked by the Worg and the attack is successful, you actually have to make a DC 13 strength saving throw, or you'll be knocked prone. So Worgs are basically dangerous hunting animals that the goblins have enslaved and use as mounts. They're formidable in combat, and you gotta watch out for them. Worgs and goblins are well used together. The two of them are known to travel together, and they're a formidable foe in any sorts of numbers, even against a decently leveled party. With CRs of 1/4 for the goblins and 1/2 for the wargs, that puts, when you put the two together, I would really balance them almost closer to a CR1 creature as a pair. They're quite powerful and formidable and not to be trifled with. Goblins on the wargs themselves also won't be traveling alone very often, and if you see just one, chances are there's going to be another one nearby. I'd recommend throwing wargs and goblins at a low-level party, maybe level 3, 4. You could even throw a single one at a lower party at level 1 or 2, but just be careful because the action economy will work against your players. If you have too many of these things, they really can cause a nightmare for your party when they're outnumbered. As players, watch out for these things. They're not nothing, especially because of like I said, they like to travel in packs. So just because you've defeated one, don't get complacent. There's probably more not far away, and chances are if you don't kill the one you see quickly, he's going to let his friends know that you're there, and then you're going to be in for big trouble. Well, that's all for today from the Awning Portal. I'll catch you next time, but for now, travel safe and have fun.
Okay, so Brad touched on something that most people don't really realize at first, but the stats really support. He said that they're focused on staying alive, and honestly, I've seen the trope of the cowardly goblin enough times to know that most DMs have a basic understanding of this during roleplay, but this mentality doesn't always carry over into combat. And the reasoning behind that cowardice isn't ever really explored. You even brought it up earlier, Dan. I'm like, hold on, I got more shit to say about it. So, they wear armor and they carry a shield. As we continue our conversations on mobs, you'll see that this isn't always the case. But goblins are smart enough to understand their own mortality. Same thing we said before. They recognize what other people are doing, and if they can, they will adopt that and adapt their own way of living to capitalize on it. So they have defenses. When you add the fact that they've got a built-in ranged attack, an increased stealth skill, and their nimble escape, you're starting to see that as vicious as these guys may be, they're really focused on being defensive. This is because they live dangerous, short lives. Not because they're particularly fragile. I mean, without the armor and shield, they have an AC of 12, and when you stack that up against a commoner's armor class of 10, and the goblin's 2d6 hit points versus the commoner's 1d8, you can see that goblins aren't nearly as squishy as they seem, especially at low level. They are still more powerful than the average human. Most people don't fucking get that. They think that these things are little hobbits that you can punt around the battlefield.
Yeah, they've got some teeth to them for sure.
Now, I don't think the goblins are actually cowardly at all. I propose that because they live disorganized lives on the fringes of society, they've just become incredibly efficient at retreating to fight another day.
They're not cowardly, they're strategists.
No, it's not what it is. So it has to be an almost evolutionary or instinctual trait because their wisdom and charisma aren't high enough to support the idea, but the nimble escape feature really promotes it. They're not cowards, they're just easily victimized because of their small stature, and so they've become good at avoiding damage. Much like the short kid in school who learned how to be mouthy, scrappy, and fast, but avoided fighting as much as possible because he's always getting picked on, and if he is in a fight, he's going to get his ass whooped.
Yeah.
Right? And so this is where my thought process with Goblinoids really kind of digs in here, is the fact that, yeah, they're going to duck out of like combat. They're going to hit once and then retreat over and over and let another goblin jump in and then pull back. And they're
going to use guerrilla tactics.
Yep, and they're not going to want to take that damage. They are going to be loath to put that shield down when melee combat is an actual threat. Mm-hmm. So they got the short bow and they're going to attack at a distance. And then the moment that your barbarian covers half that distance, the short bows go away and the shields come up, right? Because they do not want to get hit. They know that great axe is enough to kill them outright. Mm-hmm. Right? A great axe can do as much damage as their hit points, as their max HP, right? Like, they cannot withstand that, and they know it. So they're not going to put themselves in harm's way. The idea of running up against three or four goblins that are going to fight to the death, that doesn't fucking happen.
No.
Never. You have got to chase these little bastards down.
This is probably why they have one of the fastest speeds for a small humanoid at a whopping 30 feet. That may not sound like a lot, but it's huge for small two-legged creatures. This points even more to the idea that they rely on hit-and-run tactics. Now, wargs have a speed of 50 feet, so they're just as fast as riding horses and aurochs and other mounts, which is probably why the game designers built them that way. But simply by putting a goblin on a warg and having them stay mobile, I could drag out combat, manipulate battles, and frustrate players to a much higher degree. Having enemies be able to dart in and out, mount and dismount, disengage and run away, and other tactics like this can keep players on their toes. On paper, 4 goblins and 4 wargs is a CR3 encounter, but with the right terrain and conditions, I bet I could kick off a death spiral in a level 3 party pretty easily. Especially with their hit points being 4d10 plus 4 at CR half and their bite damage at 2d6 plus 3, these mounts hit a little above their CR. Brad really hits the nail on the head about how this pairing has great synergy and that makes them slightly tougher than their CRs combined.
Yeah, absolutely. And he also mentions a couple of times that they don't follow the rules, but I mean, I think that's only partially true. As you said before, they've got their own structure.
Yeah.
They definitely have their own hierarchies and social structures, but they just don't have respect for other people or other people's rules. Maybe because other people don't have any respect for goblins. I'm really coming off as pro-goblin in this episode. Yeah. I love these guys, and I'm really tired of them filling in as class clowns. That's not what they're for.
No. I actually want to remind everybody now about something we said last episode when discussing armor class. Shields and two-handed weapons that are both listed in the stat block mean that AC fluctuates. If your goblin is firing arrows this round, then his AC drops from 15 to 13 until he picks his shield back up. I'd say that this is probably true if they're riding wargs and wielding a weapon as well.
Yeah, you got to hold the reins, right? And these are not bucklers that are strapped to your... I miss the buckler. I homebrew bucklers at an AC +1 into my world. Just straps onto your forearm and that's it, right?
Yeah.
You cannot take it off. It hinders your swim, and that's the downside.
Yeah.
I also noticed that Brad skipped over a couple other things with the Worg, which I think most other people miss with these large canine monstrosities. They got a trait called Keen Hearing and Smell, which gives them advantage on perception checks that rely on hearing or smell, and they have a passive perception of 14. With their 60 feet of dark vision, that makes them excellent nocturnal hunters, and I think that you might be more likely to run into these guys on the prowl at night as opposed to during the day. It doesn't specifically say that, but again, I feel like these guys are nocturnal. Hell, are goblins nocturnal? Why not? They're all sneaky, they're all hit and run, they all... it says they don't want to come out during the day. When do they sleep?
I would say they do sleep at night. They don't like the sun. So like they're one of those.
They're active for an hour and a half at dusk.
No, I would say they're one of those like how we were at teenagers, Adam. We stayed up until 4 a.m. and then we went to bed and we slept until afternoon. So a goblin starts its day at 2 p.m. when the sun is not at its zenith.
Yeah, look, I just think that when you're going to run into these guys, the idea of there being 3 goblins just sitting there at noon on the side of a road waiting to ambush a party doesn't make an ounce of sense to me.
Oh, it makes complete sense to me. However, them being dozing during that time because they're bored, that makes sense to me.
I really prefer, if I'm going to use these guys to their best ability, the reason that they have dark vision in the first place is not because they're underground dwellers the way that orcs and kobolds are. It's because them and everyone around them is active at night. They're doing their shit at night. This is part of why they're sneaking around, why they're so crafty. They're on the outskirts. They're always on the fringes of a society. Mm-hmm. They're not like kobolds or bullywugs or lizard folk, which are way the fuck over there.
Yeah, they're in the boonies.
Yeah, right. Like, no, these guys are right up against the farmland because they are sneaking around. They are stealing livestock at 3 a.m, right? I see goblins, especially bugbears as well, having bonfires that are around, and when they have little huts and stuff, they don't always, they live in caves and, like you said, ruins and shit.
Sewers as well.
Yeah, but when you start to get the goblinoid encampment up and running with the host is on the warpath and shit, and you start to see these little mud huts popping up and whatnot, you can picture these dark shadows flitting from one to the next, silhouetted by a bonfire. There are torches around and whatnot. And they're casting, the ones that are spellcasters that we'll touch on next episode as well. They're doing that shit at night. I don't see a whole lot of goblins dicking around at noon. And I just don't see them doing that. They're going to prey on the poor bastards that are traveling at night. Right?
Yeah, I hear you. I know I've seen them everywhere, and if they were nocturnal, they would tell us they're nocturnal, other than just saying they don't like the light.
It's not just that they don't like the light. It's the fact that they've got dark vision on top of that. It's the fact that they are incredibly stealthy. They avoid taking damage at all costs. They don't want to confront people head on. I'm telling you right now, if these guys are half the burglars that people use them as, they're going to operate at night. They may not be nocturnal like a bat is, but I think their society functions. Their operating hours are dusk till dawn.
I would agree with you on that.
So I don't think that you're always going to find them sleeping. There'll still be some around walking around at noon and whatnot, but no, for the most part, I think they're asleep during the day.
Yeah. Well, the last thing I do want to point out is the main reason that wargs are monstrosities, just to change the pace a little bit here. They're monstrosities and not beast, and it's because they have their own warg language. In the It says in the flavor text that they're liable to turn on their riders if they feel mistreated or malnourished, but the fact that they can communicate is important for this as well, because they can compare notes with other wargs. And they don't just speak warg, they also speak goblin. That's right, speak fluently. Other creatures will have text that says understands the language but can't speak it, but not wargs. They can actually speak goblin.
I love that.
Which means they are full members of the Goblinoid Host. They have opinions, language, and a vicious attitude. Some of them can speak common, according to the monster manual, and with a neutral evil outlook on life. They've really got an ability to be an amazing social encounter that your players won't see coming. And I got a question for you, Adam.
Yeah.
Does a warg hate a wolf?
Oh, no more so than the average, than the person with a bad attitude hates a gorilla.
Okay.
Right? Like, they're very much in the same conversation here, but they probably see wolves. If you call one a wolf, they'll be pissed.
Yeah.
Right? But they see them as lesser beings. Absolutely.
Okay.
I love the idea of all of the goblins are dead and they've kept a warg alive because I'm going to train it to be a mount. And then all of a sudden, a deep British voice says, excuse me. Right? Like, I really like the idea of this almost a roid rage wolf having a conversation. And their intelligence is, it's low, but it's not super low.
No.
They're as smart as orcs are, right? They're going to be able to hold full conversations. And the idea that they speak all of these other languages. How many languages do you speak, Dan? Like 2.5?
Yeah, 2.5.
Yeah, they speak about 2.5 as well, the average. So think about that. Okay, so people use goblins for social encounters in a lot of ways, but normally it's one shaking goblin at the end of a fighter's blade, or it's a sleazy goblin merchant or something, and I love the idea of talking with one of their mounts or having to be escorted into a goblin lair to parley with their leader. Before we even get to the other goblinoids, let's actually talk to the lovely and not at all terrifying Megan, who is digging up some dirt on who acts as the leaders of the goblins. I also get the impression that she desperately wants to have a pet gobbo for herself.
Who doesn't?
Hey guys, thanks so much. Megan here, kind of still hanging out at Castle Ravenloft. The project's not quite done yet. So of course, as I mentioned before, we are excavating the tombs and kind of starting to identify a couple of the people that are down here. In fact, we're starting to find a lot of really cool artifacts that one day I'd love to sit down and chat with you guys about. But anyways, I've got a little time because the excavation team that I'm with here is taking a lunch break. And now that I think about it, I haven't eaten much since I kind of got down here, but I'm sure it's fine. All right. I know y'all are talking about goblins this week. Such cuties. So I wanted to chime in and kind of talk about goblin bosses. Because, any good horde needs a leader or a goblin or, a goblin boss. They're just no exception. So let me give you some details if you kind of were to come across one. So for goblin bosses, they do have an armor class of 17. So they actually do wear a little bit of armor, which I think is adorable. They do in the readings kind of specifically say that it's like a little chainmail shirt, and they carry around a shield, which I think is adorable. I think it'd be really funny to have them carry around like the shield of a regular sized person, like a giant sized person or something, just to be a little bit hilarious to me. Anyways, they do have hit points of 21 or 66, so, they're not exactly the strongest. If you think of, like, a boss, you think that they're going to be hard to beat or, really strong. Not necessarily. They're just stronger than your average goblin. Their challenge rating is only 1, so should your party come across even a horde of goblin bosses, they could probably slay them quite easily, depending, of course, on the level of your party. Regular speed of 30, so they move just as fast as your team. They do have a strength modifier of 0. Dex is +2, so definitely a little bit harder to hit. Con is 0, intelligence is 0, wisdom -1, and charisma at 0. So these are your basic average bitches from what I can feel from the stats that they give you. But they do have a couple of really good skills. So these guys do have a +6 to stealth. So, these are the guys that can probably plan out a good hide or a good raid or, a good ambush in the middle of the night for your team. You know, and that kind of checks out because, of course, they do have dark vision and passive perception. So, again, I feel like if you were going to come across one of these, it's going to be in the middle of the night while your person on watch falls asleep because they failed their check for their watch that night. They do have languages of Common and Goblin, which is kind of consistent with Goblins, but again, with these bosses, you can speak to them. So, you know, if you wanted to befriend one or, you know, end up with an army of one behind you, you could probably do that. So these guys, like a couple of other goblins, they do have a nimble escape. So what's really cool is these guys can use a bonus action called nimble escape, which actually gives them the ability to take the disengage or hide action, again, as a bonus action, which is really cool on a battlefield, I think. So I think this kind of checks out the fact that if they're fighting you and it turns out that they're going to lose, they have an escape route. Or if they want to be able to hide in plain sight, they can basically do that, which I think is really funny. For actions, these guys do have multi-attack, so they can make 2 attacks. And with those attacks, they do have a scimitar and a javelin. So kind of like your classic weapons. So the scimitar, of course, is a melee weapon attack with a +4 to hit, and it gives out slashing damage of 1d6 +2. And then your javelin, of course, is their ranged weapon opportunity, which is a +4 to hit, and they can throw it either 30 feet up to 120 feet, of course, with disadvantage. And it's it's piercing damage, right? So this is kind of your classic. If they get up close to you, they do have a weapon, and if they are fighting you from afar, they also have a weapon. So on a battlefield, these guys would be pretty fun to kind of strategize against. So I think one of the coolest things that I have with these, and it kind of retorts to being a goblin boss, is their reaction ability, which is called redirect attack. So I think this one's just really fun and would be hilarious to see on a battlefield. But basically, when a creature that the goblin sees on the battlefield or targets with an attack, you can choose basically another goblin that's within the same, I think it's within 5 feet of it, and basically they can make them swap places. And then the other goblin becomes the chosen target. So it could basically meet shields with one of its goblin brethren, which I think is hilarious. So just some cool little tidbits about what being a Goblots is all about. So one of the coolest things, in my opinion, is kind of the aftermath of their demise. So in accordance with some of the writings, it's believed that some goblin leaders are bosses who actually appoint their own successors. Which could be, of course, a family member or just, someone that they decide to train or bring up themselves. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they will, of course, be the next leader, right? In a horde of goblins, it can be just chaos, right? So it can just be the next strongest person takes it. So I feel like there would be a lot of really cool inter-politics that you can do with a horde of goblins if you felt so to get so detailed with it, right? So I think it would feel I feel like it would be a really fun set piece to be coming across a goblin who was meant to be a successor of its clan, but then was defeated in combat or in declaration for the position, and their goal in life is now to become that next leader. And they basically finds your party and implores you to help it become the next leader of its goblin clan. And then as a trade-off, it will allow its clan to become your own personal army of goblins, right? I think that'd be a really cool partnership or set piece or little side quest to have while they're on their main quest, right? Especially if you've got a character who has a backstory in, being a commander or within an army, they would feel so inclined to get back to that kind of emotion, which I think would be really cool to play with. But yeah, speaking of hordes, it looks like the group is on its way back, so I'm probably going to have to get going. If anybody wants to follow me on Instagram, feel free to do so at OmegaO, which is 0MEGGA0. But guys, I'm going to throw it back to you, but huge question for you. Would you guys use goblin bosses just as little set pieces, or would you actually use them as NPCs and characters in your game?
Do I use goblin bosses as set pieces or NPCs? I prefer them as set pieces, to be honest. If I have a goblin that is an NPC, he's probably just a base goblin, not a full-on goblin boss. He might think he's a goblin boss, but he's not statted up as one.
If I've got a goblin as an NPC, I don't want him to take in as much damage, so I'm going to I want him to take some hits. And if I'm not going to use the sidekick rules that are Tash's, then I may give him the increased
I guess that
hit
tracks,
points.
yeah.
But Yeah, I don't know. I like these guys as set pieces. It's interesting to me that we don't get Goblin King stats anywhere.
No. Well, a Goblin King is basically just a slightly bigger Goblin boss.
Yeah, but it's like 4 inches bigger with the pot belly. Like they're not more impressive in any way, and I really feel like they should be. Right? We see Goblin Kings in some of the adventure paths, right? Yeah. But there's no unique stat for them. They get Goblin boss. They get a name, is what they get.
Yeah.
Right? They're the leader of a gang, or they're, considered the Goblin King. But I really wish that we had a medium-sized goblin, like in the Hobbit movies, right? The Goblin King in that was different. Radically different than the other goblins.
I mean, in some respects, that's what you use bugbears or
hobgoblins
for.
Yeah, but if I don't want to deal with a Goblinoid Host, it says in the flavor text, there's Goblin Kings, and we just don't get stats for them.
Yeah, I'd like to see one.
Yeah, and I don't need it to be special. I would give them an extra 2 hit dice, make them have +1 strength and con, and then give them some, command ability, right? Where they have a recharge on a 5/6, shout out to everybody, and then,
yeah,
you know what I mean? So,
anyways, Adam, it feels weird that goblins don't inherently get multi-attack, because they seem so scrappy, but I'm glad that goblin bosses do, even if it's neutered. This is the only stat block that I can recall from 5th edition where it's built in that the second attack has disadvantage.
That's so weird.
I don't get it.
It's because they're not powerful enough to, if they were to get it, they'd have to go up another CR rating.
I guess that's true, yeah.
Right?
It's just to control their CR.
Well, honestly, I don't think that a goblin that can hit twice is not a big difference. And I like the fact that they are supposed to be pathetic, bottom of the totem pole kind of feature.
Yep.
And even the best ones are only slightly better. It's like they sit there and they said, how can we give them a half a multi-attack? Right? And can I just point out how weird it is that Goblin Boss gets a javelin while the average goblin gets a short bow?
Isn't a short bow better?
Yeah, it took me a while to figure out why this would be, because they both have 1d6 +2 damage and have a +4 to hit. So I was stumped about why the game designers would do this, especially due to the incredibly reduced range of a javelin, which makes the javelin better. But then I was thinking about the AC issue again. Goblins have leather armor and goblin bosses have chain shirts, which accounts for the increased AC, but javelins don't need 2 hands to wield.
Oh, okay.
That means that a goblin boss never has to lower their AC even to use a ranged attack. And now I get it.
Yeah, that AC of 17 at first level is a pain to get around, especially with 66 hit points. Sure, by the time you hit level 6, the difference between 2d6 and 66 hit points isn't a big of a deal, but in tier 1, these gob bosses, as Megan said, are pretty formidable.
Okay, so would you use the armor class hit points of multi-attack for standard goblins at higher tiers, just to keep them competitive longer? Like the 4 extra hit dice, +2 AC, and a disadvantage multi-attack, just so that goblins stay relevant at later tiers? Or do you rely on the other goblinoids to do it for you?
There comes a point where the standard goblin stat block is going to just become a minion in the 4th edition frame of mind.
Absolutely. But that's like mid-tier 2.
Yeah, that's mid-tier 2. If I wanted to have something slightly beefier on the table just so that they're relevant, yeah, I guess. But I'm probably, unfortunately, homebrewing other things on them rather than using the goblin boss.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I would honestly be leaning on the other goblinoids to do it as well, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay, well, before we get any further in the episode, let's take a second and appreciate one of the best friends we've made since starting the podcast. Jeff, who some of you may know from Instagram as the Zombie Knight, has been listening to the podcast forever and often lets us know the ridiculous things we say that make him laugh. We've reached out to him to see what he knows about bugbears, but he's trying to overcome some technical difficulties from Barovia. Let's see if he's managed to figure out the complications yet.
Testes, 1, 2. Hello? Dan? Adam? I can never tell if these sending stones are working. If anyone can hear me, I'm currently sitting around the campfire with some Vistani in a forest somewhere. I've been trading stories with their seer, Madame Ava, and the other Vistani about bugbears, and I've put together what feels like a pretty complete picture of what they're like. They're pretty big, nasty brutes. Bugbears are evil bullies that respect strength and won't hesitate to use their size to their advantage. And although they're technically medium, they tend to be 6 to 7 feet tall and dwarf most of their other goblinoid brethren. They have a challenge rating of 1, which means they're a fair bit tougher than the average goblin or hobgoblin as well. They wear hide armor and carry shields, which gives them a respectable armor class of 16. That together with 5d8 plus 5 hit points, and we've got a foe that can take a couple hits before getting themselves into trouble. Their speed is pretty average at 30 feet. As far as their stats go, they're pretty strong and dexterous with a +2 in each, and their constitution's a bit more than your average human. They're a little dumb and not very charismatic with a -1 in each, but not severely. Their average wisdom makes up for that a bit. They're really going to lean on their strength and dexterity more than anything else. With a +6 in stealth and a +2 in survival, they make capable hunters and trackers. Their passive perception's only average at 10, but they can see at night with 60 feet of dark vision. They speak Common and Goblin, so they're not linguists by any stretch, but they can probably hear what you're saying, as they're tracking you throughout the day. Alright, let's get into what makes a Bugbear a Bugbear. They have 2 abilities that define how they fight and think. First comes their Brute trait. Any melee weapon they're carrying stacks on an extra damage die when they hit with it, which gets included in their attacks. Next we have Surprise Attack. If they surprise someone and get a hit off in the first round, they dish out an extra 2d6 damage. Bugbears carry a Morning Star, and they carry javelins. Morning Star has a +4 to hit and deals 2d8 plus 2 piercing damage. The javelins are also a +4 to hit and deal 2d6 plus 2 if they use them in melee, or 1d6 plus 2 if they're thrown. The range of a thrown javelin is 30 feet on the short range and 120 feet for the long range. Put this all together and what do we have? You've got a savage brute that hunts in bands that like to ambush their quarry. They like to sneak up on you, set an ambush, and spring out at the most advantageous time to beat you to death with their Morning Stars or stick you full of javelins. Or both. Alternately, a tough and unpredictable ally for smaller and weaker goblins or organized and disciplined hobgoblins. Bugbears can often be found serving specific roles within a mob of goblins or hobgoblins. They may be more specialized or trained in certain battle tactics that increase the effectiveness of a horde, particularly when they work together. There are 3 types of Bugbear special forces, as you might call them: thugs, bulwarks, and murderers. Thugs are more about brute force than any kind of stealth subtlety. They're used to punch through lines or groups of their opponents and create openings for the rest of the horde to exploit. They jump in swinging and make space in the lines by force. Then the bulwarks are often used right after them to push through these openings and use their spiked shields to bash their opponents, widening the gaps left by the thugs, separate and smash. The murderers are a little different. These are the ones that are most skilled in stealth. They're used to sneak up on and destroy enemy sentries. An enemy without sentries can be more easily caught unaware and their defenses penetrated or destroyed. They're armed to the teeth with javelins and won't hesitate to make pincushions out of their targets. They also carry garrotes to silence enemies they catch unaware. Even more experienced adventurers should be wary of well-prepared bugbears, particularly those being led by someone smarter than they are. One way I might use bugbears in an encounter would be to have them fight alongside a group of goblins. 4 or 5 bugbears hidden alongside a section of forest road with a half a dozen goblins further back in the trees can be a considerable threat to a 5th level party. They're all pretty stealthy. Bugbears get the element of surprise and put the hurt on the front lines while keeping the party at a distance from the softer goblins. The goblins can hang back and lob arrows over the top from the tree cover. I'd use one of the bugbears to grab a weaker member of the group and run off into the woods with the goblins, while the rest of the bugbears slow pursuit long enough for the rest to get a head start. Then you get a fun chase, which is always fun and never something that parties of adventurers find irritating and, you know how it goes. Alright guys, the fellas out by the campfire have a wineskin with my name on it, so I'm gonna have to let you go. Dan, we're gonna have a talk about some, custom furniture later? If anyone wants to know what I'm up to in the hobby sphere, you can find me on Instagram at the.zombie.night. That's all I got for you guys.
Okay, oh my god, that is literally the first time that I've heard Jeff's voice.
Yep.
And he sounds like a more functional version of John Wilson from the HBO show How To with John Wilson. Dan, have you seen this?
I don't even know what you're talking about.
It's fucking ridiculous and it's amazing. Sidebar, go watch How To with John Wilson, and you will feel like you're listening to a very dysfunctional Jeff. It's subtle, but it's fucking hilarious.
I hate that it's episode 103 and we're still talking about that damn furniture.
I don't. Anyway, I guess the first thing that we're dealing with is with that fucking shield for AC again, right? Like, here we are again with shields being used, and I'm really starting to see the difference in almost evolution when it comes to the different mobs. When we get into some of the other ones that don't use shields, you really do feel like their intelligence has lowered. But, I mean, with these guys, the javelins make it so that I'm not too concerned. It's just a little asterisk that I'm aware of if for whatever reason they lose the shield. I do like that the javelin has 2 different damage breakdowns, but that's just because they have that brute trait that Jeff mentioned, where melee attacks get the extra damage die. You know, I was thinking that it would be really terrifying to give these guys great swords, but then I remembered that it's 1 extra damage die, not double damage. I mean, 3d6 is great, but I really wanted to bring the hurt, so I guess I'm just going to have to use the surprise round that he mentioned to my advantage.
Or a great axe.
It's still just an extra damage die.
Yeah, but it's a d12 instead of another d6. But, I mean, you did mention the surprise round, and for those of you who don't know the surprise rules in 5th edition, they're pretty simple if often ignored. First off, the DM decides who's surprised, but this should be based on stealth checks for the hidden creatures and passive perception for the opponents. Anyone who doesn't roll higher than the stealth check is surprised. Then you roll initiative. In round 1, whichever creatures are surprised can't move or take an action. You also can't take a reaction until after your turn in the round.
So, if a Bugbear rolls in the middle of initiative, whoever goes in front of him doesn't get actions. If they're surprised, they don't get actions or movements, and they cannot use their reaction until after their turn. And then the Bugbear goes, and anybody else later in the round that goes after him, any of the party members, they can't use their action and they can't move, but they can't use their reaction to hit back or throw up shield or anything until after their own turn.
Yeah, so it's basically just a lightning surprise round before you take up at the start of initiative order again.
Yes, so it's weirdly complicated, but once you get the hang of it, it runs really simply.
Yeah.
It starts to get oddly complicated when some creatures are surprised, other creatures aren't. Someone is waiting until round 3 to show up and attack.
Yeah.
At which point I'm just going to rely on, like, advantage for that. And so it's...
Well, it adds a lot of real chaos to an encounter when you start dealing with this kind of stuff.
Yeah. A lot of people ignore it.
Yeah. Speaking of chaos, I really like how all the different Goblinoids have different alignments. Goblins are neutral evil. Bugbears are chaotic evil, and hobgoblins are lawful evil. You can really look at how they all interact in a Goblinoid host to get a good insight on how alignment works with and against other alignments.
Yes. I really like it because in all of the other hosts that you see, all of the orcs are chaotic.
Yeah.
Right? All of the drow are lawful. Like you get, it's like a blanket alignment. That's not the case with Goblinoids, which is a shit ton of fun.
So you want to know what I'm a little disappointed about, Adam?
What? Hold on. Can I guess?
No. It's something missing from the Bugbear attack.
Okay.
Bugbears used to have 10 feet reach in previous editions, and they don't anymore. This sucks.
Yeah, and I can see the surprise and the disappointment and disgust on your face. We have, in the past on the podcast, talked about how Bugbears have 10-foot reach. We have, fucked that up. Because it is so second nature, and the player stats, when you decide to be a player that is a Bugbear, you get to add an additional 5-foot reach, which is effectively 10 feet from there, right? That's bonkers batshit. And I see that all of the time where the player shit does not line up with the mob shit.
While player goblins get Fury of the Small, and normal goblins don't.
There's a lot of that.
Yeah.
A lot. And as we continue to go over these, you're going to see the difference between shit like the drow get some spells when they're player characters that they just don't have access to. Right? Duragar are different as well. Lizard folk get weird shit.
Yeah.
It's really bizarre the way that they've designed this. and there doesn't seem to be any consistency.
I don't care. I'm putting it in. Like, my bugbears have 10-foot reach. I don't know what else to do.
You're just going to homebrew it?
I'm just going to homebrew it.
Honestly, the thing that pisses me off the most is how the flavor text that Jeff mentions garrotes, which is directly mentioned in Volos, but there's no sign of garrotes as weapons anywhere in the source material. I had to go digging in the monster manual, and I found a variant option under ettercaps for web garrotes that automatically hit, but of course I wouldn't have that for anything else. It's not a web thing, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, here's how it works. Using one is a grapple check that makes it so the target can't breathe if you succeed on the grapple check. Until the grapple ends, the creature has advantage on attacks against the target it's using the garrote on. And then those ridiculous fucking suffocation rules kick in.
Because the victim probably doesn't get an opportunity to take in a deep breath, I'd say that the table should just jump to the second part of that suffocation table, where you can stay conscious for a number of rounds equal to your constitution modifier plus 1. Probably a minimum of 2 rounds just to be safe.
Yeah, the way that it actually works is if you get to take a deep breath or anything like that, then you stay conscious for a number of minutes equal to your constitution plus 1.
Balls to that.
Yeah, fuck that, man. The barbarian can hold his breath for 6 minutes, and then when he starts to actually suffocate, it's 6 plus 1 rounds after that. So
basically 7 minutes.
So 60, that's a ridiculous number of rounds. 67 rounds before you go down. No, bullshit. It's a garrote. I'm going to hit you while you're exhaling because I'm a sneaky assassin motherfucker.
Yeah.
All right. So that's definitely how I'd be doing it. Okay. So anyway, before I go off on rants about how weapons should be, fuck, bugbears have so much potential and they only give us 2 stat blocks.
Yeah.
Right. And like they are the most underutilized, forgotten about of all of the mobs that I've seen so far. But let's jump over to Dave now, who's still gallivanting around in Eberron looking into the Draconic prophecies. This is apparently good timing because he's no longer in the Maror holds, I guess. Roar. It's just fun to say.
It is.
Roar.
Hey guys, Dave here again. I actually am on a ship right now, okay? We just sailed past Dargoon and Kraken Bay here in Eberron. And while we were sailing past there, I mean, of course, I'm on my journey here to discover more secrets about the Draconic prophecy, but on our way past Dargoon, we could see all of these bugbears from the ship that were running around on land doing, I don't know, whatever it is bugbears do, but I thought it would be a really good chance to talk about them for just a second here. Now, in particular, the ones that really caught my eye were the leaders, the bugbear chiefs, okay? These guys are a little bit beefier than a regular bugbear. Their armor class is enhanced by a little bit. It's only a 17, because they get better armor. Okay, they get the pick of the litter when it comes to loot. You know, where a regular bugbear would use hide, the chiefs often wear chain shirts. Okay, so it's a little bit. They get the better gear, right? They're more resilient. Their hit points are 10d8 plus 20, so they can be quite powerful. And their speed is 30 feet. Their best stats are strength, dex, and con, but let's be clear, wisdom, intelligence, and charisma are not that bad either. They're average, maybe a little above average. For skills, they get intimidate, stealth, and survival. Their dark vision is 60 feet, and their passive perception is average. And they speak common and goblin. These guys are a CR3. So I mean, they're pretty good. They're more than a, you know, I wouldn't throw these at a first level party, right? In addition to this, they get the brute and surprise attack like a regular bugbear does, but they also get an ability called the Heart of Hrugek, which gives them advantage on saving throws against being charmed, frightened, paralyzed, poisoned, stunned, or put to sleep. Now, in addition to the regular Morningstar and Javelin attacks that a regular bugbear would get, these guys get a multi-attack, so they can make 2 melee attacks. Now, when you line these guys up side by side to a regular bugbear, they're about the same size. They're just a little more enhanced. Their strength is increased, their con is increased a little bit, but their intelligence and charisma is increased as well. This is also, the bugbear chief also gets intimidation where the regular bugbear does not. But I mean, other than that, the big ability that they have is the Heart of Hrugek and the multi-attack. That makes a heck of a difference. These guys can hit, and they can hit hard. And when they do, your players are going to feel it. If they can hit twice, I mean, obviously they're going to feel it twice as bad. If I had a player that wanted to stop and discuss things with a Bugbear tribe, horde, whatever you want to call them, which I'm not sure how you do that, but if you did, they're going to be talking to the Bugbear chief. These guys are intelligent, they're charismatic, they intimidate. These guys are made to be able to have a conversation and not just be the foot soldiers that regular Bugbears are. It says in one of the books that the leader, the chief, is the most fiercest member of the Bugbear clan. So what stood out to me as being particularly interesting is because they're the fiercest, they become the chief. So, of course, they're going to get the better gear, which explains the AC increase. But this advantage on saving throws against being charmed, frightened, paralyzed, poisoned, stunned, or put to sleep, you're telling me that their god just automatically zooms in on a chief and gives them the ability to get advantage against these things? Like, do they have a pact? Is this warlocky? This seems kind of warlocky to me. It's interesting. Anyways, guys, I got to keep moving. They want me to scrub some sort of deck. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but I'll check in with you guys later. And back to you guys.
God, I hope it's the poop deck.
More ships need a P deck. I'd be content if he had to scrub a P deck, yes.
All right, shut up. Back to the Bugbear Chiefs. I want to start off by saying that these creatures aren't stupid. Chaotic, yes. Bullies, yes. But they're more capable in a conversation or strategy session than your average commoner. The knee-jerk reaction here is to play big and dumb, but that's not the case with the Bugbear Chief. If you're going to get into a social encounter with your party with one of these guys, then it's okay to pull at your A game and show them that you're smart enough to verbally go toe-to-toe with them.
That's going to fucking shock your bard.
Oh, yeah.
They're going to think they're dealing with a barbarian again, but no. There's a reason these guys are chief.
I straight up would go like highfalutin, like British noble with him.
Why do we always make it British? Well, I make it British, you make it Jamaican and call it British. Anyway.
I mean, you're not wrong.
The Heart of Hruggic? God, fuck this. Sure. The Heart of Hruggic ability shows that they're seemingly blessed with basic defenses based on fortitude and willpower. Advantage against poisoned, paralyzed, and stunned conditions.
Yikes.
Show how hardy they are. Although I noticed that they can still take poison damage, but that's a rant for another time. Fuck you, wizards. And advantage on saves against charmed, frightened, and sleep effects show that they're not weak-willed either. Whether it's a blessing from a god or an innate physical ability, Bugbear Chiefs are far tougher to deal with.
As they should be. And I like the idea that they're kind of like warlocks. Do you think that their relationships are akin to warlocks and their patrons or clerics and their gods?
Warlocks. I know that they're gods. But when you look at the spellcasting abilities that they have, it's all arcane magic. They don't get, no Goblinoid gets divine magic. Therefore, it's got to be, on the arcane side of things, and it's not musically based, it's not inherent in their system, and it's not, that they didn't learn it, they didn't study it, so I gotta say it's a warlock. They're getting blessed by a higher being.
I'm gonna throw in a third option and go paladin.
That's divine again still.
I mean, yes, it's divine, but it fits the flavor more. It's just an arcane paladin. So an eldritch knight, I guess, but no, that has learning to it. This is a gifted power that just happens to have arcane things. And paladins can cast some traditionally arcane spells.
Well, I mean, sure. And if you are arcane domain cleric, you can get, like, arcana domain, whatever you want to call it. But still, this screams warlock to me. I would really have it like little shrines that they pray to, not altars that they go to church for.
Yeah.
Right? These are little shit and bone and stick shrines in the back that they've put, like, mashed together to be able to pray to their god so that they get a blessing. Right? Not so that they're devout and, oh God, I hope my god likes me. No. Gimme.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's why I say it's kind of like a warlock. Let's move on, I guess. I'm afraid to find out exactly what Terry's been up to.
Yeah, me too.
But let's head over to Greyhawk and find out. I hear he's got a surprise for us from Volos.
Oh, good.
Thanks, Adam and Dan, for passing it back over to me here at the Green Dragon Inn. We're taking a little break from the festivities over here. Everybody's kind of tuckered out after doing goblin body shots. And let me tell you, that little fella was quite tired after the whole party ran through him. Anyway, we're looking at Nilbogs. For some of the more observant of you, you will have noticed that Nilbog is goblin spelled backwards. I'll confess, my brain doesn't work that way, and I didn't even think to look, but once it was pointed out, it became all too obvious. So let's take a little look at some of the background of Nilbogs, some of the lore, exactly what they are, and then I'll move on to the stats. A Nilbog is essentially a spirit, essentially the splintered essence of what used to be the trickster god of the goblins before Maglubiet destroyed that god and splintered their essence. And what happens is these Nilbogs as a spirit will possess other goblins purely with the goal of causing absolute chaos. Now, these Nilbogs amongst the goblins of the Goblinoid folk are celebrated for the fear and the chaos that they cause amongst the goblin overlords of the Bugbears and the Hobgoblins. Now, if you were a goblin overlord, you might think, well, doesn't it make absolute sense just to kill a goblin that's become possessed by this trickster god and become a Nilbog? Well, in actual reality, that may not be the best way to go. What happens is, when you kill a goblin that is possessed by a Nilbog, that spirit then moves on to another goblin. And so in some cases, it may just be better the devil you know, and just finding some way to control that goblin that's possessed. And a practice that goblin overlords will typically take is to just simply appoint a jester among the goblin folk within the goblin host. And this is almost like a reverse Negan from the Walking Dead approach. If you're not up to the Negan episodes, spoiler alert in 3, 2, 1. But what Negan from the Walking Dead does is he's known to kill only one person. And it's to make a point to bring everybody else on side because it's only that one person that Negan needs to kill. Where this is the reverse idea, in that the goblin overlords will appoint one jester goblin who is simply allowed to do whatever they want whenever they want. And this is seen as a way to appease the trickster god so that they can essentially somewhat control the chaos among these Nilbogs that the Nilbogs create. So let's take a deeper look into a little bit more of Nilbogism then. So a Nilbog is an invisible spirit that possesses only goblins. The spirit has a flying speed of 30 feet and it cannot speak or be attacked. The only action it can take is to essentially attempt to possess another goblin, and that goblin has to be within 5 feet of it. If a goblin is targeted by the spirit, it needs to succeed on a DC 15 charisma saving throw or it will become possessed. Nilbogs also contain innate spellcasting. They get extra abilities from becoming this variant of goblin, and I'll go into a little bit more detail about that in just a second, but what I'd like to do now is to hit the stats. So a Nilbog is still a small humanoid. It's goblinoid. It's chaotic evil, and that makes perfect sense with it being an extension of the trickster god. Lower armor class, we're thinking leather armor here, 2d6 for hit points, but still a standard speed of 30 feet. When we start to look at the stats, we're seeing higher dexterity and charisma. That makes sense for a trickster, in my opinion. What's interesting is that their con and their intelligence is still that of an average human being. Their intelligence is still that of what yours and I intelligence would be today. So that's interesting to me because we often see goblins as being more stupid, and we've explained on previous goblin episodes that it's not really. Their problem-solving abilities are still equal to what mine would be in the real world, and yours as well. Don't single me out. It's their problem-solving is the same as yours as well. It's their strength and their wisdom which is a little bit lower. For skills, we're seeing stealth, makes sense. Senses are dark vision, passive perception of 9. Languages are common and goblin, lower challenge rating of 1. But we were talking before about innate spellcasting. So the Nilbog's innate spellcasting ability is Charisma. Spell save DC of 12 here. And it can cast the following spells. At will, Mage Hand, Tasha's Hideous Laughter, Vicious Mockery. 3 of my favorite spells anyway, and I think it makes perfect sense for an extension of the Trickster God. And once per day they can cast Confusion. This is why this is so important for a Nilbog for part of the Trickster God, is that confusion is very difficult to deal with because there is no set outcome from that spell. It's very difficult to counterattack with and strategically plan what you as a player character is going to do in opposition of this, because you're not entirely sure what the outcome is going to be at the end of your turn or the start of your next turn. So it's not like having another spell where it's a set outcome every time and you can start to think about how you're going to plan it. There's multiple variables that you need to handle when you are becoming victim to confusion. That's why I love that spell so much. The enemy is constantly on the back foot, the person who's on the receiving end, and racking their brain about how they're going to deal with it, because tactically it's very difficult to handle. So, we'll talk more about Nilbogism. Any creature that attempts to damage the Nilbog must first succeed on a DC 12 Charisma saving throw or be charmed until the end of the creature's next turn. That makes sense for Trickster God for me as well. The Nilbog can't regain hit points, including through magical healing, except through its reversal fortune reaction. Nimble Escape. The Nilbog can take the disengage or hide action as a bonus action on each of its turns. For actions, we're seeing the Full Scepter. This is their melee weapon attack, so can hit one target within 5 feet. They also have a short bow as well, and with that we see range of up to 80 feet or up to 320 feet with disadvantage. But let's look at this reaction for the Nilbog. I like this one. Reversal of Fortune. In response to another creature dealing damage to the Nilbog, the Nilbog can reduce the damage to 0 and then regain 1d6 hit points. This is why I like this Nilbog for a lower level party. So we know that Goblinoids are typical for lower level parties being introduced to the game or starting their campaign. This type of character, the Nilbog, is the first time I think that we can challenge a newer party with having to deal with something when the conditions are not perfect. I was joking with Dave a few weeks ago when we were talking about all of the typical tropes of D&D, and we were talking about well-lit dungeons that don't seem to affect the human fighter that doesn't have dark vision, perfectly square rooms, and a well-swept stone floor. And that's how I think of those first couple of encounters. But now we have this Nilbog which is causing confusion, which for the first time is putting your party on the back foot, causing environmental changes, is giving you problems such as when you hit that target is now regaining hit points, is not taking damage. We're talking when that Nilbog is killed, the problem doesn't go away, it's merely transferred to another goblin. And now, while this may not be a deadly encounter, it's the first time that the players must come together and think much more tactically in the moment in a situation where conditions are not perfect. It's a great first little test when you're trying to make the encounters a little bit more interesting. But a unique idea I have for this, and this is what I like to do when we see things that are typical of monsters and enemies, is to find a way to bring it into the party. So this is a creature that I would definitely be using if I had a goblin player character in my party. And the reason for that is, if you are taking on a host of goblins and there's a Nilbog, if that Nilbog is killed, that spirit transfers to another goblin. Put that into a situation where that other goblin may be the player character, and then make it part of the puzzle within the encounter. Make it random. So assign your player character goblin a number. You can even be fair to them and let them know that number and say we roll the d20 or the d12 or however many goblins there is, and if it lands on that number, then that Nilbog will transfer to that goblin. It keeps it perfectly fair and open, but it makes it more interesting. So now the encounter is not what we thought it might be. It's not just standing and banging and slashing a load of goblins, because each time you kill a goblin there is a chance that Nilbog may transfer to your player character. So now we have to think of other ways. Maybe we have to escape. Maybe the challenge is going to get harder, because as we move through the rooms of the dungeon, there are going to be more and more goblins, because we're not killing all of them in each room, and so we have that add-on effect which adds to the challenge. It requires urgency. It means that those puzzles along the way in the dungeon have so much more stress to them, because you don't have the 10 minutes to sit there and figure out how you're going to get across this rope bridge that's hanging by a thread, because the threat from the goblins is that much more increased, because you're incentivized to not kill them because of the Nilbog. So that would be my unique idea for Nilbogs. I love Nilbogs, and as what always happens to me with this podcast is I of course research things in more detail as we're going to do it on the podcast, and then I get super excited. I make a load of notes. I stick them in a journal somewhere with my other 23 journals that I haven't written in, put them in a cupboard, and eventually I'll dig it back out to put it into a game. But that's all from me on Nilbogs. I absolutely love these little creatures. I can't wait to use them. Adam and Dan, it's back over to you, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Terry. Dan, how dreamy is Negan?
The fuck?
I'm kidding. Mostly. Calm down. So, Nilbogs, as far as I'm concerned, are as close to in D&D as we come to the embodiment of pure chaos for the sake of evil fucking chaos. This is the Joker. This is Kefka. This is a hyper-intelligent 12-year-old pyromaniac. This is that look in Brad's eye when he thinks no one is looking. Nilbogs are beautiful creatures of purity and opportunity, but it's evil and it's chaotic, and I love them.
You are a frightening son of a bitch.
Look, honestly, Nilbogs are what people think all goblins are. Crazy, wacky, destructive, and random. That's how people play fucking goblins.
Yeah, no. The thing I love the most about them is this reaction. It's devastating. There's no save involved. No dice or conditions or prerequisites. They just shrug off the damage and heal 1d6 hit points. There is so many fucking nonsense with these guys that I feel like they're more Fey than Goblinoid.
My question is where they get their Fool's Scepter from. Their melee attack is listed as Fool's Scepter, and the picture has them holding a scepter with a little goblin head on the head of it, but it's not magical, but I mean, like, fuck, hey, why not? Why wouldn't it be? I want these guys to be able to conjure their scepter from thin air once a day, packed to the blade style. And do you feel like they should have an evil cackle?
100% yes, but to build on that, I agree. But it shouldn't just, like, appear out of thin air. They've got to, like, reach into something to pull it out. That
I think, yeah, but it's like, it's behind your ear.
Yeah,
right? Like,
right? Or like, out of their hat.
There has to be a somatic component.
Want to see me pull something out of my hat? Big ass freaking cane. Come here. Like,
and then you just get fucking whumped.
Yeah. I mean, it also occurred to me that with that floating spirit detail that Terry was talking about, as well as their measly 2d6 hit points and shitty, let's be honest, AC, you could be playing a whack-a-mole with a Nilbog and a host of goblins for a long time. He kind of hinted at that, but you can imagine a series of caves full of goblins, and when you meet this guy and kill him, suddenly, next round, a different goblin starts giggling and turns into a Nilbog. I'm pretty sure it even says that the spirit can leave the host goblin whenever it wants, but it can only do that when there's another host nearby to possess. What would happen if a Nilbog learned a damaging secret about your party and wanted to pass that information to the big bad evil guy, Adam? Do you think he could just bounce goblin to goblin until this happened?
Oh my god. What if they were the big bad evil guy? You know, the god doesn't even have a name. I mentioned that there was one before. That's this guy. Because the goblins are afraid to give him one. They think that Maglubiet will learn the spirit's name and use it to destroy the spirit. And this is obviously a hint that goblins worship this trickster god. Mm-hmm. And I can just picture a room of sneering, evil little bastards watching with malicious, silent delight as the Nilbog does something really evil and disruptive.
You know, if I'm not going to feature gnolls in my campaign, I'd totally give an established Nilbog a hyena as a pet.
Or a gnome. I'd give him a gnome just to torture. And all the other goblins would sit there and just grin. Their pointy little teeth.
Yeah, put him in a little like red costume with a yellow cape and beat him with a crowbar.
If that's what it takes, Dan, for you to have happy time.
Call him Jason.
Yikes. There's going to be someone named Jason listening to this who does not get the Batman reference you're making.
Jason Todd would beat my Joker with a thing. And
yeah. That was really dark really quickly, Dan.
I mean, the Joker's badass, and if you're throwing a Nilbog in and you want to go to inspiration, do the same.
Or you could just... Man, he'd already mentioned Negan. Yeah. I really like the Nilbog. The Nilbog is going to be used as a counterweight almost to show you what goblins aren't. Which is what people use them as a class clown. This shit pisses me off. That's not what they're for. They're conniving, devious little bastards. They're not necessarily smart, but they're adaptable as fuck. Right? And so having the Nilbog be the crazy, devious bastard. And there's no way to kill the Nilbog spirit.
No, there isn't.
Your DM has got to come up with some sort of like banishing spell or something to do that.
Okay, everybody, you got to go talk to Maglubiet.
What?
or not. Please not.
I really like Terry's idea of having the Nilbog actually possess the goblin PC in the party as well.
Oh, especially if he's like, well, not just the goblin PC, but also if the party like ours did have that like little goblin.
Oh, the Boblin, the Goblin, like beloved NPC. Yeah. And then suddenly he's this cackling evil fucking nightmare with an erection for no reason. Anyway.
Can you do the shout out now, Adam?
I'm going to do the shout out now.
Okay. Thank you to everyone who helped on this episode. We miss having you guys here with us, and we really hope everyone is staying safe and happy out there. I just want to remind everyone that you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and at r/itsamimic on Reddit. You could also reach out to us through our email at info@itsamimic.com because we love hearing from you guys, and any questions that you send us will get added to the lists for upcoming mail episodes. Thanks, guys. All right, Adam, as with the previous couple episodes, by now you know that this part of the podcast, we are going to be talking about some mob structures and where to fit these goblins in a horde, these mobs in their mob hosts. So let's grab dice and roll. I want to know what are the implications from these breakdowns that we have and where you'd place them.
Sure.
I got an 8. We got it.
Oh,
we both got an 8.
Yeah, we both got 8s.
I got an 8 again.
I got a 6.
Okay. So, I mean, what we've been able to see from these, from the goblins up until this point, I'm not going to talk about the bugbears heavily in this section because the bugbears are kind of their own isolated thing. They've got their own little chief. They've got their own little army of bugbears. They're
really straightforward. We only get 2 stat blocks.
There's only 2 stat blocks. Like, one is positionally higher than the other, you're done. Right?
I mean, mechanically, yeah, it's 2 CR higher. Like,
yeah.
And I'm not even sure it's fucking worth 2 additional CR.
No, I would agree. It's probably not.
It's like 1.5.
Yeah. But when it comes to the structure of goblins, like, honestly, you kind of hit the nail on the head earlier when you were talking about goblins that will, like, pick up their bow and drop their shield and like their tactics on the battlefield. I would lean more that direction than any other sort of mob building when it comes to this, right? Like, yes, we have the goblin boss, right? But we don't have a goblin king. We don't have a lot of supply there. So when I'm throwing goblins on a field, I'm mainly just throwing goblins and then modifying their weapons as it comes to it.
Yeah, I mean, I can agree with that. I have to look at, as we sit down and we go through all these different mobs and whatnot, and I'm doing all the prep, and of course I'm prepping 10 fucking episodes in advance. As I'm going through all of this, I start to see the differences between the way that the mobs are used. And I find that goblins and kobolds are really used in a very similar way. Mm-hmm. So I want there to be a difference at my table. And when you read the lore, when you get into it, they're very, very different.
Yes, very.
But people around the table use them in very similar ways. And I know we got a kobold episode coming up, and we've done a kobold episode already. And I mean, I guess we're going to point people back to this, but like, it's very different. They are very, very different kinds of creatures because while they both use guerrilla warfare, kobolds are trapping it Vietnam style, like trapping the jungle. Yeah. They are, you may never see the kobold you're fighting. But goblins are, you're right, they're throwing bodies at the problem. They're not going to pick a fight unless they know they can win, but they will pick the fight.
Yes.
They are not necessarily going to be minions to anyone. I don't like goblins as minions for anybody except the Goblinoid Host. I know that they're traditionally minions, especially when you get into like back alley gangs and water deep and shit.
But see, here's where I have an issue with it is, I mean, you look at your typical big bad evil guy level monsters. Your dragons, they've got their kobolds.
Yep.
Right? Your
liches have undead.
Liches have undead. Everyone kind of has this.
Mind Flayer has all of the shit from the Underdark.
Yeah, right? You don't really have much in the way of what is positionally higher than a goblin other than another hobgoblin, right? So I would completely agree, because also goblinoids bone and reproduce more. They're up there in that prolific chart that we mentioned, up there with orcs and humans and dragons, right? So you have massive
boners.
No, you have massive tribes of these goblins. You're not enslaving them all. There's just too damn many of them. Right?
Yeah,
they're kind of that thing's like, okay, that's where the goblins are. We're just going to leave them alone. And I might threaten the goblin boss to pay me a tribute, but that's just so they can give me some of their spoils because I know they're looting stuff. I'm not going to mess with them because, I mean, we live in the age of 5e. Action economy is a thing.
They're going to fucking win.
They're going to win.
Yeah, you almost need to... If you have a kingdom and your farmlands are getting raided by goblins all the time, you have to march a battalion of, like, heavy armor knights up to the goblin boss and say, listen, motherfucker, we will give you 100 gold at the beginning of every season, but you leave our shit alone or we will slaughter the group of you. Look at how strong we are.
Yeah.
We're choosing not to. Here's your gold. Fuck off.
Yeah.
Right? If you attack us or our people or our trade routes or anything, then we will rain holy hell upon you. But it comes with a threat, but it's got to be carrot and stick because you don't want to get into that fight.
No.
This is like trying to deal with black mold in the basement, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like,
It's a never-ending fight, right? And, like, that is...
And they will remember.
Yeah. And because they're so prone to being bullied and overpowered, they will concede and be like, yeah, man, yeah, we'll just go over here then and we'll leave you alone.
We'll see you at the beginning of the season.
See you at the beginning of the season. And they'll keep true to that commitment.
Unless they think they can get away with it.
Unless they think they could get away with it. And after a little bit, they'll start testing again.
Yep. They'll be hanging out, just watching.
Yeah.
They want you to know that they're there. They're going to see what you do.
Yeah. City rumors in the tavern will be like, hey, did you guys see the goblins overlooking the road from the cliff face over there?
Yeah, they've been painting their symbols on the freaking cliff face again.
Yeah.
So they're back, right?
Yeah.
Like, and it's shit like that. I really like goblins for that. Whereas bugbears are going to be the non-altruistic Robin Hood.
Yeah.
Right? They're just going to chill out in the forest.
They're the ones who are going to cause that, turned over caravan on the side of the road that every single player eventually comes across.
Yeah, but I feel like the difference is if goblins do it, you're going to find 10,000 little... Sidebar. Why do goblins not have daggers? Every goblin I see in any amount of artwork has a big, like, almost a curved blade of a dagger of crude... Like, I feel like every goblin needs a dagger. Just because when you find a bunch of halflings face down on the side of the road, they should have a whole bunch of, like, stab marks in their back. Like, they're getting shanked in the kidney because that's exactly what what goblins tend to do. But with bugbears, like you said before, they're pulling heads off. There's spinal cords that are missing. You're going to see rib cages caved in. And they're going to pick up one halfling and beat another halfling to death with until they're both pulp.
The thing about bugbears also is heads will be missing. Every single head will be gone. I want to see them have daggers too. The idea that they have the scimitar is weird to me.
Yeah, and you know what? Slashing damage, sure, but I really think that they need to be, like, carving people's spleens out. They're just poking holes in your back until you stop moving.
Yeah.
That's a goblin thing. I also look at bugbears specifically, if I could talk about them for half a second here, because I don't think we're ever going to come back to them in the next couple episodes, or at least
so
not
one
fucking
note.
much. They're not only are they one note, they're completely underutilized in 5th ed.
Yeah, we've been saying that WotC, Wizards of the Coast, has done a lot of good when it comes to the lore of goblinoids and orcs up to this point. With our readings going forward, we know
they get that one little like that one little almost sidebar. Well, they get a sidebar too in Volos, which actually breaks down. And I mean, Jeff went through it. The idea that they're the thugs, which just go in and cause havoc. Then are the bulwarks that come in with their big spiked shields, which, by the way, there's no fucking stats for. And then they've got the murderers with their garrotes, but they're not even like on the battlefield following up. No. Right? At no point do we get anything about what mounts these guys ride. Because it says specifically with the Worg, goblins and hobgoblins. What are the bugbears riding? Right? And I know that bugbears, they're not going to take care of their mounts. But I can totally see them wrestling with an auroch or something else to keep it nearby because it's big enough, it's vicious enough, and they're going to utilize it. And when it becomes too much of an issue, hey guys, steak. Right? But there's really a place for bugbears to be a low level, like tier 1, I'm going to say level 3, level 4 threat where you got to hunt down this gang of bugbears that's fucking around in the woods. But once you clean them out, they're done.
It honestly feels like when they were designing bugbears that they decided that bugbears were going to be an addition to a Goblinoid host and nothing more.
Yeah.
right? And you really get that feeling if you dive into goblins and hobgoblins as well.
Well, goblins they do get a lot more, and honestly, the hobgoblin is all about the host.
Yeah.
That's their purpose. They've got some more shit going on. I love them as NPCs and player characters.
Yep.
Because they seem to be intelligent enough to fit that role. But I have trouble seeing a Bugbear as part of a party. He's just gonna, if you play him as written, he's just gonna piss off everybody else. He's the barbarian who's like, no, fuck you, you do it, right? And I do like that they're bullies. And I like that the hobgoblins will wield them as bullies against the goblins to get the goblins to do their shit.
Yeah.
But again, it's that one note. There's nothing else going on there.
Yeah.
So let's jump in for a moment because we're talking about bugbears. Let's look at the player character.
Okay.
Bugbear traits. Okay. So your your ability score increases. Strength increases by 2. Dex increases by 1. That makes sense.
That
I could see it flipped as well, frankly.
No, it makes sense. My problem is there are a lot of stat blocks that are 2 of the physical stat, like the physical stat and a mental stat together as a boost. Getting +2 strength from a min-maxer point of view, +2 strength, +1 dex on a probably melee class.
That's big.
That's massive.
Yeah, you put this on your fighter or your barbarian
or your
ranger.
Rogue.
Honestly, I really, really, really fucking like these guys for ranger specifically, and they make sense, but you'll see why they double up. Like there's not quite the good synergy with the rogue. Traditionally speaking, you're right, rogue, but they don't get the mechanical synergy. It says in here and not anywhere else what their age is. Their adulthood is at 16, and they'll live up to 80.
So they live about as long as a human.
Yep. They have whatever alignment that you want. They tend to be chaotic evil, but they need to be self-sufficient. That's built right into their alignment paragraph.
Okay.
All right. They're between 250 and 350 pounds, and there's a huge height difference, 6 to 8 feet. All right. They're big.
Yeah. I want to see the 6 foot. What was the other? Like 350 pound?
Yeah. A big fat guy.
That's real big fat.
Yep. So your base walking speed is 30 feet because they're not going to fuck with that too much. You get dark vision, 60 feet of it. And of course it's grayscale.
Yep.
You're long limbed. When you make a melee attack on your turn, your reach for it is 5 feet greater than normal. That's the only place. It still pisses me off. Like, you are right. It's not in the basic stat block, which just drives me nuts.
It drives me up the wall. It needs to be, man.
They get powerful build, which means they count as one size larger. They're sneaky, so they get proficiency with the stealth skill. You can see how this is really going to have better synergy with the fighter, who doesn't necessarily get that, than a rogue, because every rogue gets stealthy nonsense, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But they also get surprise attack. If you surprise a creature and hit it with an attack on your first turn in combat, it deals an extra 2d6 damage to it. That's kind of it's the player version of what the Monster Manual has to offer for their surprise nonsense as well, right? And then they can speak, read, and write Common and Goblin.
So that surprise attack.
Yep.
Pair that with an assassin rogue that auto crits on the first round of combat.
Yeah, I know, but even then, you get a bunch of shit already with that surprise attack. Is what this is the problem with the rogue. You're one fucking note, and you're already perfect.
Okay. No, as a bugbear, you're right.
The best thing about it is the fact it's got the 10-foot reach, which means that you don't necessarily have to disengage half as much as normal, but rogues get the fucking ability to disengage as a bonus action anyway, right? So I'm not getting the synergy. For a fighter, that's big.
I'd say it still is quite powerful for a rogue. It is bigger for can you imagine this as a paladin?
A monk?
Oh, a monk would be massive on this one, because they're getting in the fight first.
Yep. So I really like this when I'm going to homebrew a character or a monster, or I'm going to do something else that's going to be a little bit different. I want there to be more different kinds of bugbears. Then I'm going to start looking at this player stat block and applying some of this crazy shit to them. There'll be the Bugbear Stormtrooper, the Bugbear, I don't know, that carries a whip, but the whip is 15 feet instead of 10 feet. Or like whatever it is to make them feel different and more flavorful. Do you have any insights based on the basic stats here?
I find them super powerful. Like they're a bit much
For a player, and
for a
yet
player character,
for the
yeah.
monster, it's sweet fuck all.
Yeah, it's like wet fart. So like, there's got to be some sort of correction there in my mind. I would love to see goblins, and well, I mean, we've seen goblins get a more refined player character stat block, but I want to see that with bugbears, and I want to see them dive more into these stat blocks.
I just want there to be the next Tales of the Yawning Portal or Ghosts of Saltmarsh. The next time that we get a whole bunch of different adventures, the way that they have focused on things like lizard folk and the Sahawugan, or however you fucking say that.
Bullywugs.
And they get all these bonuses or all these additional kinds. I need one now for bugbears. Give me 3 more kinds of bugbears and look at the player's stat block to do it, right?
I would love to see a goblinoid focused adventure path that uses what we have for goblins and hobgoblins,
I was
maybe
thinking the
one
same
or two
thing.
other things.
I was thinking the same thing about orcs as well. Like,
Bolster the bugbears a little bit. And I mean, we see these campaigns where you have like the end villain is a winter god, or the end villain is a vampire lord, or the end villain is a series of elemental lords, or whatever it is, right? Like,
yeah, here's what I want, Dan. Let me tell you. As much as I rant and bitch about how tier 4 is undersupported, and it criminally is undersupported.
Yes, yeah.
We need more level 3 to 8 adventure paths. Put 3 of them in a book. They keep giving us these modules that are supposed to last 2 years, but how many people finish them if it's not Curse of Strahd?
Yeah, right.
So let them get a flavor for orcs for 1, goblinoids for 2, I don't know, drow for 3.
Yeah, there needs to be something between starter set and Curse of Strahd.
Yeah, and I mean, they try to do that with the Essentials kit, but the problem with all the modules they have right now is that they're almost like a little bit of a tour of all of the shit you can find in this environment.
Yeah.
Instead of, let's focus on this one thing. Yeah, if you're dealing with caves and goblinoids, you'll run into ropers and dark mantles. You're still going to hit your beasts and your carrion crawlers and that kind of shit. But we don't need to have like, it's a goblin campaign, so here's a couple of kobolds in town over here, and over there we're going to ride some Pegasi, and like, we don't need that shit.
No, we don't.
Just do goblinoids. Do it really well and do it for 80 pages, right? I think the reason we don't have that, the reason that they give us these big, like multi-page breakdowns and volos, is so that you have enough to build your own campaign. If you know enough about it, you've got some DM experience, and you're willing to put the time and effort into it.
Yeah, they need to make it easier for the layman DM at this point, because they've built a lot into, making this game accessible for everybody. And right now, if you want to have a lot of bugbears in your campaign, and you want to focus on goblinoids,
there's not a fuck of a ton you can do there, right?
No, there's not. But let's talk about some plot hooks ideas that we could help with. Sure. Some campaigns that we could help with. Let's roll the dice. So let's do a plot hook each and then a campaign each.
Do you want to do goblins first and then bugbears?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Sure. Oh, well, I got a natural 20.
I did not.
So we mentioned it very briefly, the idea of goblins as a plot hook. We're going to do that first. Plot hook for goblins. A tribe of goblins has moved into the ancient catacombs or sewers or whatever under your village that you've got set up. And they have started looting things. Things have started going missing throughout the town. Stop them.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty standard.
Right? It's pretty standard, but having the goblins that close means you now have people leaving their houses that they live in at night or in the morning to go to work or whatever it is, hitting rope traps or traps that have been placed around, and
they're out there for maximum disruption.
Yeah.
I feel like they're led by the Nilbog.
Yeah, I'm down for that.
I want to Flip it. I can come up with about 1,000 things for Nilbogs, but I feel like the chaotic, evil, wacky goblin has been done to death. So let me focus for a minute instead on wargs. Here's my plot hook. You wake up in the middle of the night, and there is a warg sitting at your campfire. And the warg fucking looks at you and says, so a bunch of goblins just took my cubs, and these goblins are nasty, and I want to take this little tribe out. I need your help. And then I will show you where the goblins stash all of their loot. Help me rescue my cubs, my little pups.
That's badass.
Yep. I also like the fact that if your players start to death spiral a little bit, that warg may turn on them.
Uh-huh.
Right? Like, I think that in the end, that warg might not be your friend, or it has set you up. The goblin sent this warg out to fuck with you, or whatever it is, right? Like, it might not all be on the up and up, but even if it is, that's really weird. And I like that. You don't see that shit. We should start thinking about wargs almost as if they're humanoids as far as their planning and scheming and communication.
Know what? It's purely because of that level of communication that they can employ. Like, if they're able to talk, they should have a lot of...
Especially they can speak common.
Yeah, right? So let's roll the dice. See plot hook for bugbears.
Sure.
A 13.
Ooh, I got an 18. Okay, so honestly, I'm just going to go with the classic for this. A gang of bugbears came in and displaced someone who runs a roadside inn, or like the farm on the very, very outskirts, or the little fishing village has been displaced by this gang of, let's say 13 to 18 bugbears with one chief. That's a problem for a tier 1 party to really have to deal with. This is where I'm going to start to get them to strategize. And bugbears, again, they're not real stupid. They're going to lock doors. They're going to put up barricades. And at some point, they're going to realize it's not worth it, and they're going to try to leave.
Yep.
And I think that if they leave, you're just done. You've driven them out. They're not going to come back for revenge. That's a goblin thing. That's not a bugbear thing. You know, honestly, I keep thinking about the anarchist side of bugbears, the chaotic evil. I think that bugbears with mohawks and like a lot of like earring jewelry and shit too would make a lot of sense.
Mr. T just bugbears?
I'm thinking more of like the stock stereotype punk bad guy from the Ninja Turtles cartoons in the early 90s, right?
My idea would be I want to go a little bit different with this. I get a lot of like Mr. Hyde level like tones from bugbears, like just that Victorian slasher level stuff.
Sure.
And if I could homebrew a garrote or use this
from the
Ettercap garrote thing, then murder mystery with a single bugbear chief going throughout your town, murdering people, and putting their heads on sticks outside their homes.
I really like a bugbear chief as a serial killer. That's a lot of fun.
And now you got to find this guy. And during the day, he's up in a attic or in a abandoned warehouse or somewhere sleeping. So you have to track the evidence to catch him during the day, because at night he will wake up and he will strike again.
Yeah. I really think that's a lot of fun.
Okay. Full-on campaign ideas using goblins. A 7.
I got a 3. What do you got, Dan?
So, Adam, bear with me.
Bugbear with you?
No, that's later.
Okay.
We have said that goblins kind of line up with their interests with other goblin tribes fairly well, fairly easily.
Yeah.
We've seen that they have these massive tunnels, and they tend to use caves and old ruins as their main bases, and then if they expand, they will tunnel deeper. What happens when two goblin tribes expand to the point where they break into the Underdark?
I think that that's semi-common. Like
I would say so as well, but they meet each other in the Underdark, and now they have a war, and now you have Goblin War in the Underdark. For a full-on campaign of trying to separate this now Goblin host, not Goblinoid, Goblin host in the underground, where you are also dealing with Drow, and you're dealing with Ettercaps, and you're dealing with myconids and stuff. And
Yeah,
it's just flowing through as a great Underdark campaign. This could be a massive piece for it.
I'm going to say this. If I'm going to have surface goblins versus Underdark goblins, the Underdark goblins have got to be super fucking pale. They've got to have like white
And
skin,
weird.
like red eyes. Yeah, their noses are like really pointy and always running. Like they're gross goblins compared to the surface ones. You think the surface goblins are gross because they don't wipe, more than once? The Underdark goblins are real nasty.
Yeah. What do you got?
I'm going to lean on the Nilbog a little bit for this.
All right.
But I'm not going to do chaos for the sake of chaos. No. The spirit of the Nilbog has a bigger plan. And that plan is utter, total fucking destruction. It is aware when it is outside the body of a goblin. And just because the goblin dies doesn't mean that it dies. And it may stay in the rotting corpse of a goblin.
Until another goblin passes by or
Why-
just choose to.
Why does it have to be a goblin? I'm going to take this unnamed spirit and I'm going to have, I don't know, a wizard or whatever. Madame Ava is going to show up and is going to say, hey, look, this spirit is hopping body to body with this information from kingdom to kingdom and telling all of those secrets that the kingdoms want the others to know. And so the dwarves, who actually have an old elven crown from way back when the elves think was lost 300 years ago. No, they still have it. And now the elves know about it. And it's sowing discord from one to another.
I just had a epiphany as you were talking.
Did it hurt?
Lightning has struck my brain.
I just had an apostrophe. Yeah.
So, if you time the party's first encounter with the Nilbog around the same time, I don't know, your Pact of the Blade Warlock gets his sword or whatever it is, you have that one barbarian who has their weapon that is cherished and named, or paladin or something. You guys killed that goblin encounter. Congratulations, you all level up. And in that night, after you have leveled up, your sword starts speaking to you.
Oh, and it's a freaking
And it got
Nilbog?
possessed by the Nilbog. And it's tricking you into thinking it is a hyper altruistic,
Like intelligent weapon.
But nah, dude, it's just a Nilbog chilling out in the space between the hilt and the pommel.
And I freaking love the idea, too, that it's going to, tell you, oh, and the Goblinoid Host is over here, and go kill them, and they will leave you hints, and watch for the yellow bird symbol.
Yeah.
And then he's going to go into a goblin and leave the symbol and come back and be like, oh, yeah, it's on a big rock that'll be on your left.
Right? How long would it take your average D&D party to realize that sword is fucking with them?
Until I tell them, because D&D parties are traditionally not thinking to the level of kerfuckery that a DM is.
Yep. That's amazing.
Yeah, I fucking love it.
Okay, Bugbear campaigns.
I got a natural 20.
I got a 6. I'm so glad you're going first because
There isn't one. There's nothing there.
You got 2 stat blocks. How the hell are you going to build a campaign around this?
I'll tell you this right now. The Bugbear campaign that I'm going to build, the Bugbears are just an intro to it. So you're going into a couple of goblins first, beginning of tier 1. Then you're going to start to run into Bugbears. Bugbears are going to be an issue until you meet the chief, about level, 6. And then he is going to be your entry into whatever the Goblinoid Host is with hobgoblins. It can't be a Bugbear only campaign, right?
Yeah.
The only way that you're going to get Bugbears in a campaign is as minions. And I don't like them as minions unless it's for the Goblinoid Host. So, sorry guys, Bugbear campaign is just not on the table in 5th ed right now.
This is the first time we're kind of like, it's hard to do.
With only the 2 stat blocks, and you got a CR1 and a CR3. And the CR3 is kind of weak.
Yeah.
Right? There's some fun stuff in there. I like the idea of their gods playing a big role. But if I don't have a Bugbear in the party, it's hard to dig at this shit. Mm-hmm. They don't have a social structure outside of roving gangs. They don't have complex societal issues. Their pantheon is, I don't know, the smart guy or the mean guy. Or the guy that says fucking run.
Yeah.
Right? There's not options, right? So I don't know what you do with it, especially because they're nocturnal. They only show up at night, right?
God damn it!
I'm not gonna lay
give
off
them.
this. No, I'm convinced that Goblinoids, at least Bugbears and Worgs, are nocturnal. They're the stealthy hunters. They're gonna do it at night.
Yeah, but lions are stealthy hunters too, and they do it
And
in
they
broad daylight.
no what? No, they don't. They hunt at night.
They hunt in broad daylight too.
They hunt at dusk and night.
I think you are being a bit too. You're reading into it a bit too much on that one for like saying they're nocturnal. I agree they're probably the most active at night, but I wouldn't say they're nocturnal.
They're not nocturnal like bats or owls where they are not functioning during the day.
Bugbears are.
Bugbears don't function during the day.
They don't function during the night either.
But no, that's my fucking point, man. Is they fucking function at night. That is the point. That is what they're there for. They will have one guy that's kind of poking the embers, keeping the fire going during the day because they don't want to kick up a whole bunch of smoke while everyone else sleeps in the shade. And then when the sun goes down, everybody starts to wake up and they go out in their raiding party and they come back again.
So for my campaign, we said that there wasn't much of an option, but if you're going to do anything, freeing the bugbears from this vigor sap that Gruthek, whatever his name is,
Grunkle.
Yeah, is something you might be able to draw on. Like they're so spiritual as a species that it's going to be hard to justify it, but they are being actively siphoned by their deity. If you believe what bugbears say, if they're being actively siphoned by their deity, there's a campaign idea right there to stop that, solve that, rectify that, do whatever you need to do with that. Also, this
that also like leans into what Dave was saying about them being like warlocks.
Yeah, right. So you are freeing this fuel source of the bugbears, and maybe if you end these two gods, you see bugbears end up being not necessarily the lazy, murderous, savage.
They all get top
goblin.
hats and monocles is where you're going
Yeah,
with this?
why not, right? Like, just go off the deep end with it, because you gotta get creative to have a campaign centered on bugbears.
Yeah, you really have to think outside the box.
Yeah. Anything else you want to mention about bugbears and goblins?
I have a shit ton I want to mention about goblins, but everyone's going to have to wait a week.
Yeah, we got 2 more weeks of this before we move on to our next mob, so any other information, just hold tight, guys. Wait for the next couple weeks. But anyways, so that'll be a decent portion of what we could find in 5e on Goblinoids, but we're only a third of the way done. Don't forget to come back next week when we cover other kinds of goblins that are sneaking around the pages of Olos. That's it for this episode of the It's a Mimic podcast. If you'd like to support us, you could head over to www.itsamimic.com and hit our fancy donate button, or tell your friends and the rest of your D&D party about the podcast. We're available on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube, as well as most podcast apps. Stay safe out there.
Thank you for listening to another It's a Mimic production. Inquiries, shoutouts, requests, and mailbag questions can be sent to info@itsamimic.com.
All right, we're getting one final message from Jeff through the sending stones. Let's see what he has to say.
Hypothetically, if you, Dan, and Adam had to become one type of goblinoid creature, what would you choose and why?
All right, let's roll initiative here, Dan. Let's
Sure.
see. What kind of goblinoid are you? 14.
What kind of goblinoid am I? I want to say I'm a bugbear.
You are very clearly a bugbear.
I'm not lazy. I'm really not, man. I'm busy all the time.
Yeah, but it's because your wife tells you to be busy.
No, it's because I have a million different things, plate spinning, up to and including a podcast. So, not a bugbear. I honestly,
Well, you'd be a bugbear chief.
I'm. If anything, man, I'm a goblin boss. That's where I sit.
You want to be your own boss?
Yeah, kinda.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be a couple episodes till we get there, but I would say that I'm a hobgoblin devastator, if I was going to be one, just because they're learned in the ways of war, and I spent a lot of time reading through these fucking books.
Yeah, you really do.
Let's go through everybody else. Let's see.
All right, cool.
Just by the broad strokes.
11.
I got a 16. Dave. Dave is a bugbear. Dave is very much a bugbear.
Mm-hmm.
Dave goes hunting at night, but we won't say what he's hunting for.
Brad. I'm trying to like rack my brain on like Brad's kind of a Nilbog.
I was about to say Nilbog. The way that he fucking trolls everybody on
He's
in
our
an
little
internet troll.
In a little Discord, like he'll just drop these little like bombs, and we're just like, dude, what?
He will set people off.
Yeah, he will.
Okay, Terry. Terry is a bugbear chief.
Yeah.
Yeah, Terry wants the most for the least amount of effort. He's willing to do the work, and he's going to, and you're not going to be able to charm him or frighten him very easily. And he's got like that, he won't be paralyzed or poisoned. Like he's got kind of like the physical stats to go with it as well.
Mm-hmm.
But no, yeah, he's going to be a bugbear chief, I think. We also have, who else has been on the show in the last 6 months?
Let's say Pepperina.
Pepperina is a Nilbog as well. She is just out to stir shit up.
Yeah, I would agree.
Is there a horny Nilbog? Is that...
That's literally, I like called you over to give me Volos so I could look through it to see if there's a horny Nilbog or an equivalent, but nah, apparently not.
All right, Tyler.
Tyler's a goblin.
He's a goblin. He's just through and through a goblin.
He's just a goblin. And I say that with absolute love for goblins.
James is a hobgoblin.
Yeah.
He is
no nonsense. Just
like he's there. Like James is a funny guy, but
yeah.
like when it's time to get to work, it's time to get to work, and there's a right way to do it.
Yeah. Jeff, it's goblin too. Hefe, I love you, buddy. But
you're not lazy enough to be a bugbear.
You're not lazy enough to be a bugbear.
I don't know.
And he is a tradesman, so he puts in the work.
But I've seen behind his DM screen, he talks to me about his campaign, and he is currently fucking over his party in Curse of Strahd. Like that man strategizes. He plots. He feels like he might be a hobgoblin captain, maybe.
Okay, yeah.
And then of course there's Megan, who is lovely and wonderful and is a queen hobgoblin. If she's an elf princess, please don't hurt us anymore.
Magoobliet.
Yeah. Yes. But it's like E-T-T-E at the end. Magoobliet.
Thank you for listening to an It's a Mimic production.
Okay, you're done. Get it.